Hello friends, it's me, your old pal Kevin. This episode of How To Wrestling was requested by Russell Kidd, one of our lovely backers over at patreon.com/How To Wrestling. Forgive me and forgive us, this episode is a little bit different from normal. Just to give you some context, if you're not aware of the speaking out movement and the allegations and whatnot that have come out in recent weeks here in the world of, in recent days and weeks here in the world of wrestling in June of 2020, the first portion of this episode was recorded before the allegations, and the second part has just been recorded at the end of the month here after the allegations. So there was probably around a space of a week and a half to 2 weeks between the two parts. And the reason that is because while editing the first part of the episode, which, and fair content and trigger warning here folks, there was a discussion about AJ Styles' homophobia over the years, and in our discussions of it, which were in light of the Black Lives Matters protests and the reaction of certain wrestlers to it, it kind of felt like the chat that we were having almost felt like not of the right tone in light of everything that has happened. And having listened to that part and then record the second part where we typically come back and we have our tweets and whatnot, we end up talking about the speaking out movement, how it has kind of impacted us and the podcast, and also how it kind of makes us kind of look at some of our discussions in a new light. So all I will say is, if you're expecting it to be a normal episode, it is for the most part up until the break, but I will say that first normal part isn't really indicative of maybe where we're at the moment. Just to bear it in mind when it was recorded. It isn't your typical, like, here's some tweets about everything that's great. There's still a new episode announcement at the end. There's a very important chat that we have at the end. A lot of much needed discussion about it. We talked about it as well on our Backlash episode, which is dropped on Patreon. And as well as that, it'll be on Joe's Q&A where we've talked about it as well. It just felt like we couldn't record and not talk about it. And we certainly couldn't leave the first half of that episode without addressing how the world of wrestling has kind of changed in the last week. If you want to give the episode a miss and it's not for you and it doesn't seem like your thing, I totally understand that. If you want to listen to it and hear kind of our thoughts, it's some raw chat. There are raw thoughts at the end of it. And I'm sorry for going on so long at the start of the episode. It's probably the last thing you wanted to hear when clicking on here for How To. You wanted a bit of an escape. But look, we wanted to be honest with you. We wanted to be open. So with that being said, here is the episode. It's How To AJ Styles. And welcome to an episode of How To Wrestling, the world's first podcast detailing how to wrestling, how to get into wrestling, how to understand wrestling, and goodness knows maybe even how to enjoy wrestling. I mean, there's some stuff out there, man. And today it is no doubt a banner episode, a phenomenal episode, as we talk about the pit bull out of Gainesville, Georgia. The man who has charted a course mostly aerial through the hearts, minds, and souls of wrestling fans for near 20 years, if not more. Today we're talking about AJ Styles. I hope once again it's me, your old pal, Cowboy Kevin, joined as I am by the ever-inquisitive, although I will say, today, Madam Inquisitor Joe Graham, you know a little bit about, or more than a little bit about, our topic today.
I'm familiar with AJ Styles, yeah.
He's been part of your wrestling diet for a few years?
Yeah, definitely. In terms of like episodes we've done, I think AJ's definitely up there in terms of one of the wrestlers I've known most about comparatively to other wrestlers we've covered.
Right, so you'd seen, he's somebody who's on the current product,
Yeah, he's on the current product. We cover some of his matches for our pay-per-view reviews that come out every month. So
yes.
I've been following the entire of his WWE career, like as a podcaster.
Right, yeah.
So yeah, I am aware of his current work. I'm not super aware of the stuff he's done in other companies. I know he's a bit of a TNA man.
Yeah.
And I think he worked in New Japan as well at some point, but I think I've only seen like the odd match from TNA here and there, and like 'cause he's popped up in other episodes.
He
like,
has.
He came up in Samoa Joe. I'm pretty sure
that was a very, very early one. That was way back in 2015, a very early episode. He did pop up there, and that is why we will not be doing the triple threat with Styles and Samoa Joe and Christopher Daniels, because we did it ages ago. That's how good we are in this podcast. I think he showed up in the Nakamura episode as well.
Could well have done, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, AJ Styles, and forgive me, folks, he is someone who has got somewhat of a complicated discussion to have today, because I can't think of anyone we've ever had a response to where people have been enamored and went to bat with and talk about their great passion about the man as a wrestler. But I would say, I don't know, is it fair to say equally we've gotten a similar amount or more even messages questioning the man's kind of his character, his politics, his state of mind, for lack of a better term. I think a lot of people have issue with AJ Styles, the man, as opposed to AJ Styles, the performer.
I mean, definitely so, but I wouldn't say, like, the tweets, they were more people saying, oh, he's a fantastic wrestler, than people saying, oh, he's a homophobe. Because I think, you know, fans of this podcast, they know our opinions on AJ Styles. I think they'd be preaching to the converted if they were going on, oh, did you know that he's a bit of a homophobe? It's like, yes, we've spoken about this before, and we will speak about it on this podcast.
And we will change no minds. But I think it's something which has definitely hung around with AJ his whole career.
Yeah.
And it's something that we will have to talk about, I think, at multiple points. What did kind of strike me about AJ Styles is that even though he is a performer who's definitely, I mean, is breathtaking a word, which I don't think I'd use that very often. But
I mean, he's phenomenal.
That's a word. What does it mean, though, in wrestling, to be phenomenal?
Define phenomenal.
This is the definition of phenomenal. Remarkable or exceptional, especially exceptionally good.
Wow, remarkable or exceptional, especially exceptionally good. That's better, because earlier on Joe asked what John Cena's weight was, and it was like, according to YouTube, big show to John Cena, I weigh 396 pounds, you're as strong as Brock Lesnar, big Cass.
It was like a riddle.
Solved for Exa. So, okay, exception, very noteworthy, notable. That you're someone who likes flip-de-doos.
Yeah.
I think quite early on in this podcast, people were like, Joe Graham's gonna love her some AJ Styles if you like that flavor of wrestling.
Yeah.
But is he more than just flips?
Yes, he is more than just flips. I think when AJ joined the company is when my tastes in wrestling started to diversify.
Right.
I was a big flip-de-doo fan. And then when AJ came along, and to be fair, it's not just AJ, because I feel AJ came along around the same time as, like, you know, Shinsuke Nakamura, as
There was an
Joe,
influx of this cooler style.
British strong style, yeah. There was like all these different styles, and I think AJ, he's so good at all of them. Like, you get a bit of everything with AJ, and it's mainly flips, so it's like, it's very immediately impressive to someone who doesn't know much about wrestling. But the fact that, like, you know, you can watch any match of his and you don't really know what type of wrestling style necessarily to expect consistently.
Yes.
Like, you're not going to get, like, just flips. Like, he will do, like, some really nasty strikes or some submission moves or, like, mat-based stuff.
It's really funny when I was doing our research for this, because, like, AJ is someone who, you know, I've probably been aware about for the better part of, I'd say, 16 years thereabouts. I've been watching AJ Styles in one form or another. And it's funny, we listened back to a Young Bucks episode not that long ago, and I recall, like, kind of going, wow, like, a lot of the criticisms that are leveled at the Young Bucks in, like, 2015 was stuff that people were saying about AJ Styles his whole career. And it's like, we know it now just to be completely untrue, where if you were someone who was flippy in the kind of, in a period of wrestling when that style or being very high-flying wasn't really the norm, it's very easy to criticize someone by saying, oh, they don't sell, they don't, like, react to the pain of the maneuvers, it's unrealistic, it's not real, it's a spot fest, is what they would say. A spot fest being a festival full of spots, which sounds like a great time, really.
Yeah.
Because lots of people like popping spots, and in wrestling, I love spots.
I want a top spot fest.
Yeah, that'd be cool. It could be sponsored by Cool Spot from 7-Up. You know, you could come along. There was a cool spot at one point.
What's a cool spot?
Cool Spot was was a 90s attitude-laden avatar. He was it was a red spot who had big cool sunglasses on it.
Never heard of
You wouldn't have
this.
heard of him. He was just a spot fest monkey. That's all he cared about, was doing his spots and all that.
Okay.
So, AJ, I've been surprised by the amount of people who have messaged in mainly to tell us that AJ Styles is silly, goofy, believes in flat Earth, and there seems to be 3 different AJ Styles that exist. There's AJ Styles, who is the breathtaking, phenomenal, as described by Google Hive Mind. There's AJ Styles, the idiot who's got like all of the trappings of a small town, small-minded person from way out nowhere in America, where it's like, I don't believe germs exist.
Yeah.
The Earth ain't round. Company ale, they smell. And then there's the other AJ Styles, which is this like super religious conservative. Hey man, I don't think Obama's been born in America. Hey, can The Rock use the N-word, man? You know, this is the AJ Styles who a lot of people, I think, suspect is the real AJ Styles. Now, obviously, AJ Styles, if you view him as being a homophobe and just that, like, I'm not going to try and ever convince anyone that AJ Styles is, like, not 90% of the things that people think he is.
Yeah.
And here's someone, I'm catastrophically straight. And I say this as someone who spent his formative years at a Catholic all-boys boarding school, so I'm very sure.
Yeah.
And as also...
There were some sexy boys there.
But I will say as well, having went to an all-boys boarding school, I have been pounced on and beaten the shit out of by large groups of boys, calling me the homophobic slurs that AJ Styles has been using as recent as 2015 in wrestling.
Oh, God, that is recent.
That is recent. And whatever, I'm sure the boys who pinned me down and punched the shit out of me because, I don't know, I ate my lunch in a really gay way, you know. Think about that, I was very straight, but I did everything in a slightly too gay way. Like, that was my curse in boarding school. So I'll be called that all the time, and to say it would hurt my feelings, obviously, yeah, it was hurtful, but it was not necessarily a hate crime because they were just using that word flippantly like an idiot. Like I'm sure everyone you know in school did as well.
Me as well. Like, I would be totally lying if I was like, I have never used a slur in my life. Of course
you
I
were
fucking have.
a teenager in the MySpace era.
Yeah, I
like.
was an edgy teen, and I thought it was so cool to, like, use slurs all the time. And, you know, I want to say now, like, I am bisexual now as an adult, but I was not bisexual as a teenager. I was straight.
Right.
So I don't think it's, like, some kind of internalized, like, homophobia that I had against myself that I was like, oh, I'm secretly, you know, conflicted with my sexuality, which is why I'm like this. I don't think that's the case.
It's just a synonym for the word bad.
It was a synonym for the word
and
bad.
It's
Yeah.
horrible itself. Yeah.
When I was like 18 years old, I remember saying to my best friend at the time, I was like, you know what? Gay is my favorite word. I just love how it just means anything bad. Like, you can just use it as a synonym for anything you want. It's fun to say. And then it was like a couple of years later, I was like actually learning about sexuality and the historical weight of like certain slurs have behind them. And I was like, oh, wait, if you think about like this for literally 1 second, maybe this word that means gay,
Yeah.
meaning all things bad,
Yeah.
maybe that's problematic.
a little bit, like.
Just a little. No, it's very shitty. And that's the thing, because like, I think there's an important distinction to be made, because lots of us, and wrestlers as well, have got a history of using slurs in a kind of like, we're so cool, look at us using the F word
We've
wherever we
done
want.
episodes about people that we've talked about at great length about how great they are, what a leading light they are.
Yeah.
For Sami Zayn, he's someone who's used racial slurs as a stupid 20-something-year-old. Kevin Owens, when he was Kevin Steen, and I will say most people who shared a locker room in PWG, that word, you know, Excalibur used to say it on commentary all the time. You know, there's so many people who've used it. It's a problem in wrestling. But the difference with some of those folks, yourself as included, is that you've obviously spent a little bit of time to think about it.
Yeah.
Kevin Owens, I know that he released a statement, you know, talking about specific, because I think there was one of those like wrestling lad Twitters, like, look at Kevin Owens, the lad back in 2010 using this slur, what a lad. And he like made an apology about how he's learned from it, and he's ashamed of it and all that. And, you know, does that mean that it's totally okay? I'm sure that some people will say fuck Kevin Owens and that's fine, you know, that's their right. Like, the way I've always viewed it is this, is like, that word used to get used against me as a straight person, and those instances were very, very horrible, and that word meant nothing to me other than a bad word.
Yeah.
So, like, the fact that if that word could remind you of those situations, and then it has the added historical context
or, like,
and all that,
literally re-traumatize you and like
Yeah.
give you flashbacks to like horrific things that have happened to you. Like that's yeah.
I mean, like, it's fine for me now looking back on those days because I can just kind of go, oh, those are all those idiots who are using stupid fucking slur words. I don't look back and kind of go, wow, I was the subject of several hate crimes on a routine basis.
Because the difference is they could have used like literally any other insult and it would have had the same weight to
they
you.
used some other problematic
Yeah, sure.
insults that were prolific in the early noughties as well. But AJ Styles ain't said diddly boo about his repeated use of those slurs.
No, and that's the thing.
I mean, if you're using them these days
Oh,
as
yeah, if you're
well,
using them
like,
these days,
there's
yeah.
no, you
Yeah.
can play, there's an element of like, oh, there's the fog of the 2000s where we didn't know what was all right. I mean, have you ever read PlayStation Magazine from back
Yeah.
then, guys? You know.
But I'm not excusing that. Like, we should have known better then, too.
Yeah,
Like,
oh,
it's
yeah,
not-
absolutely.
Not like it was right then and is wrong now. It's like, it was always wrong. It's just, you know, we were all stupidly uninformed and I think very ignorant, and we hadn't done the work yet to understand why these things were so offensive. And it was thanks to, you know, some very kind, patient people who helped explain to me why these things were bad. And then also me putting in the time to do my own thinking and reflection and go, oh, okay, that would be really harmful. Maybe I should have some fucking empathy here. It's not as easy as just having one or the other. You can't just rely on everyone else to educate you, but you can't also, like, you can't do this by yourself. You have to have at least something to refer to kind of open your mind up a bit and go, oh shit, I'd never thought of it like that.
Yeah.
And that's the difficulty with AJ Styles. Unlike Kevin Steen, who obviously has done the work and he's come out the other side now and he's like a vocal anti-slur user now and he finds that use of those words absolutely horrific, AJ Styles has said nothing. He's very silent on the matter, and that makes me think that
As he's on most matters.
except for like everything else, like flat earth and video games and fucking whatever.
Yeah, the important stuff.
Yeah, the important stuff. So that's the trouble. I feel like if you're given the opportunity to say, look, I made some stupid mistakes, I was ignorant, I was hateful, I was hurtful, but I'm working every day to be a better person, then that's good. You shouldn't be, you know, I don't know, pushed in a hole and left to rot and forgotten because, like, you're trying.
If we pushed Randy Orton,
Exactly.
now, apples and oranges entirely here, folks.
Yeah,
you know,
obviously.
Not all slurs are equivalent, and not all, you know, viewpoints are the same. You know, but just on the point of education and learning, the fact that Randy Orton in June of 2020 has managed to be educated on the sensitive issue for him of Black Lives Mattering, and he was able to have that framed within his previous, you know, lizard brain, all lives matter.
Yeah, he's
like,
come a full 180 degrees. Like, I mean, I think we said in our Patreon review we made fun of Randy Orton saying all lives matter and blue lives matter, and he really was as like...
poster child for stupidity and ignorance.
And the fact that he, like, and again, it's not just him on his own. I don't say it's like anyone's job to educate us on this.
No.
We need to be working hard to educate
the only
ourselves.
person whose job it is the people ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, even those of us who think we know a fair bit,
Yeah.
there's always education to be done.
Exactly. We all have Google, so
Yes.
there's really no excuse. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's like Randy Orton, he's learned, and not only has he learned, he's actually spoken out about the fact that he's learned.
Yeah, now, I'm not saying that AJ Styles ain't learned.
We don't know.
He maybe AJ's learned, he just never talked about it.
But that's the trouble. If you don't actively apologize for your actions and work every day to rectify them, then you may as well have not learned.
But yeah, and also as well, a bit of hyperbole there, folks. I don't assume that AJ Styles has learned, because there's obviously in wrestling a lot of folks who've got different political opinions, different opinions on what constitutes fairness, this, that, and the other. There's a lot of racists in wrestling. There's a lot of homophobes in wrestling. Historically, that has been the case. Now, I feel like a lot of the wrestlers who I grew up watching as a kid have had some real fucked up opinions and are probably, as a character on screen, you can make arguments about them being a role model, but as them, as an actual human being, there's different arguments to be made. And I would say with regards to like AJ Styles and stuff like that, is like, if I had a kid and they were watching AJ Styles matches, I'd be like, awesome, great, look how fun it is, look how athletic it is, this is amazing stuff. But then if he turns out and says, hey Dad, AJ Styles is going to be doing a 2-hour live stream on Mixer, I'd be like, no.
That's your son, AJ Styles.
He is. He's been so influenced, Joe. He's become AJ Styles as well, which is ridiculous. And he's also your son as well
no.
now. That's the terrible thing about it.
We're such bad parents.
But in the same respect, if as a kid my mum saw me watching Steve Austin break up a couple of black weddings and kind of think, all right, there's something he's watched on telly. But then I turned around and said, Mum, I'm going to go for a fucking 2-hour live stream where Stone Cold Steve Austin's going to give me his thoughts on literally anything. She'd probably be right to sound the alarm bell.
But do you think she would have done? Because I don't think, like, the average parents, I don't think are, like, we are an anomaly in that we are very educated on the politics of the wrestlers involved in the show.
Yeah, that's true.
Whereas I don't think your parents would have, they don't read dirt sheets. It wasn't even like it exists in the form it does today.
When I was a teacher, one of my bosses, he had a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old, and they were allowed to have Instagram, but he had access to the account. So every time they followed someone and every time they got followed back, he had to approve it.
Yeah, that's a good lesson,
And I was like, all right, if I could have that with wrestlers.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, though. It's not a similar... It's false equivalence to some extent, because the level of access to the personal minds, thoughts, and hearts and souls of wrestlers now compared to back then.
It just did not exist
did not
then.
exist.
I mean, even today, like, even though Stone Cold Steve Austin has a podcast,
You don't know shit about his
know
thoughts on
anything.
loads of things.
Yeah, I
You ain't
mean-
going to talk about Deborah anytime soon, folks.
I mean, we know that The Undertaker is all like all lives matter and stuff, but that's because like they've just released a documentary series like for the first time in his career ever.
Yeah.
Like, wrestling is such a soundproofed industry, I want to say.
Or it
because, like,
historically has been, at least. 'Cause
Yeah.
I don't think it is now, but some people still treat it as way. For instance, Brock Lesnar, who we know for a definite fact is a homophobe.
yeah,
We also,
and the hateful type of homophobe,
Yeah.
like really nasty.
to the point where it's known that Lesnar has literally told WWE management, don't put me on media calls because God knows what I'll say.
Yeah.
AJ Styles seems to be the other brand of that, where it's like, hey man, I've got some thoughts and some stuff, but I'm just not going to talk about it.
Except he does sometimes.
It comes out sometimes, like when WWE decided it's a good idea. Well, we talked about this in 2018 when he was feuding with Daniel Bryan. They thought, let's put face AJ Styles on the fucking Crowder podcast with the right-wing racist provocateur and have him talk about the Gillette ads.
And that was really interesting, I think, to see as well. I didn't watch all of it, but I watched a couple of clips. And, you know, I think it's easy to take something like that out of context and be like, ha ha, look at this idiot. He's such a right-wing, stupid brain. And yeah, obviously AJ is a bit of an idiot and he is ignorant and he comes from a very traditional family. Like, I think we need to talk about his childhood a bit, I think, because that's important to recognize, is that, like, there is a cultural thing going on. There's a difference between, like, hateful homophobia and just, like... And I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong. I'm just saying...
They both need to address it, but...
They're both addressing it in
the
different
issue
ways.
of ignorance versus the issue of pure hate.
Yeah.
And I think those things, even though the effect of that might seem
Be the same, yeah.
but I think the causes are probably different. And also I think as well, some battles are easier to win, whereas I think that if someone is just, it feels to be greatly misinformed, and I know it may seem like we're just sitting here hoping that AJ Styles is just going to have someone have a chat to him like Randy Orton did and everything's going to be okay. But I don't think like that's right. I think the reality is, though, is that there are some people who are possibly more easy to talk to about this. But I think what we've definitely learned from watching a lot of stuff with AJ is that confronting ignorance with straight up criticism and anger doesn't necessarily lead to that person being enlightened.
I think it's just difficult when I think a lot of these lessons that we give people in terms of things like racism and homophobia and misogyny and stuff, it comes from this presumption of like a baseline understanding of the subject matter. And I think when you come in with that kind of presumption of, oh, you already know this, this, and this, then you can come across quite critical. It's like, but why don't you know
Or
this?
that we're just simply incompatible.
Yeah.
Like, this person's just from a whole... I can't talk to them.
But the truth is that, you know, we're all different. We all come from different... We all have different access to education.
And we all learn
access
in
to
different
resources.
ways and different
Yeah.
speeds, I can tell you that for sure, yeah.
Of course, we all have access to Google, but not everyone has the access to kind of use critical thinking. To be able to think of a subject matter and look at it from different angles, to look at someone else's life and go, how is that different to what I've experienced? Like, there's an element of critical thinking which isn't taught in schools, and some people just don't have. And
like, when I was a teacher, every kid, like, the kids had their phones, and the rule was that they weren't meant to have phones, but I would say, like, there were certain classes where I would let them have their phone because I would do like research-led things because I taught science, and I would say, right, well, everyone's got access to Google, and I would make the assumption, well, if they all have access to Google and they're all like doing their GCSEs, they should all know the basics of how to search for things, and they didn't.
No,
and then I had to do lessons to teach them how to teach themselves, type of thing, and there's so many assumptions that go in about, and when you get the subject matter gets a bit more sensitive, and also with AJ Styles, when those lines get blurred between, this ain't just something I'm thinking about like politics, this is my God I'm talking about, and this is something that AJ Styles has said over and over again in his life: God first, family second.
And you know how much he fucking loves his family. Like, they are number one, the most important thing after God.
Oh, what? How could you tell with AJ Styles, Joe, that the family is an important part of the whole thing?
Well, for one, he's got all of his kids' initials and birth dates on his chest.
Yes, and all of his kids' initials
are AJ.
Like him. He's Alan Jones, and all of his children have AJ as their names. Well, he's 4 children now, three boys and 1 daughter.
Imagine the male in that household. How confusing that would be.
I bet he's got a little crown that he makes him wear. The heir to the throne, man. I mean, with AJ, I think we have to talk about his background, because I feel like we're reaching the point now where we're talking a lot about the kind of the critique and stuff that's leveled at him. And for me, like, that's often been an issue with AJ, is that it feels like you can't see the forest from the trees, because it's like you want to have a discussion about AJ Styles as a person, then someone says the gay community, and because it's a meme, that's the be all and end all. I hope we can get to a level of discussion beyond the fact that AJ Styles reactionarily said a very funny and somewhat revealing thing nearly fucking 20 years ago. And hey, I definitely played my part in making that a meme as well.
Oh, yes, you did.
So, Kevin over here in the Outshare podcast with the glad gay community, we certainly took the fucking discussion around AJ Styles down a few notches. Because very easy, you can be someone who's like, I don't think AJ Styles is a homophobe. Why is he a homophobe? And you'd be like, well, get this. The gay community, and the person's like, well, how does that make him a homo? AJ grew up, unlike a lot of wrestlers we've talked about, he grew up not watching wrestling.
Really?
Not a fan watching wrestling growing up.
Hang on, I mean, I'm just trying to think, like, how old is he? Like, what era of wrestling would he have watched if he had been watching?
AJ would have probably been growing up in... He's like 40-something. AJ would have been growing up in the early 80s as a kid.
Like, kind of Bret Hart would have been...
No, it would have been... Like, what would have been on
Hogan.
WWE would have been Hogan, Savage, Ultimate Warrior.
Maybe that's why he's such a good wrestler, is because he didn't watch any of the bad wrestling of the 80s.
But in the 80s, the NWA, you had Ric Flair, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, the Four Horsemen, all this great stuff going on there as well. So, like, AJ, I've watched a lot of interviews with AJ over the years, and I had to rewatch some stuff just to kind of refamiliarize myself. But yeah, AJ grew up originally on a Marine base. His dad was part of the Marines, and then he moved to Gainesville when he was like 1 or 2 years old. He lived in Gainesville, Georgia, pretty much his whole life.
Okay.
And he grew up poor, and that was why he did not watch wrestling. Like, it's not like kind of, we didn't watch it, wasn't on. It's like, we didn't have TV most of the time. Or when we did have TV, we had, like, a crappy little homemade aerial where sometimes you got to watch a little bit of Georgia Championship Wrestling, the locals seemed like it.
So his dad wasn't a Marine his whole childhood then?
No, he was not. And the stories about his dad, there's not much said, but he did specifically say in earlier interviews I found that the dad did drink, and the dad routinely beat his mom and the kids.
Oh, God.
But, and again, this is like, I couldn't tell you why he'd say this, but he's went out of his way in several of his interviews to say, but I know my dad loved me, and I loved him.
Well, you know what? I can't speak on behalf of abuse survivors, but I think it's really hard to not only acknowledge that you've been abused, but also I think that's even harder to say that my parents didn't love me. Like, there's something reassuring to say, maybe that's how they deal with their issues, but I know they love me. And that's okay. I think it's your place as an abuse survivor to say.
I think that's a very important part of, obviously, AJ's psyche or persona. And like, that kind of, I feel that very often we kind of forget to even ask kind of basic questions about like people's upbringing and things like that oftentimes. And it's very shocking to me how often abuse comes up on this podcast when we're talking about people's early days. So yeah, it's super religious though. That was a big thing with the family. Like, he was super religious, but he claimed this was something that wasn't put into him by his parents. This was something he arrived at his own conclusion when he was in high school.
Oh, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Oh yeah, in what sense?
Well, I think, and again, I feel really awkward talking about this because I'm not religious in the slightest. I'm massively agnostic.
Well, I was raised lax Roman Catholic and went to a strict Catholic all-boys boarding school. So, like, I will understand on paper at least.
Yeah.
Maybe some of the
It
reasoning.
just seems to me, from what I've seen, when you're raised religious, you go of one or two ways. You either, like, are raised in a very wholesome, healthy kind of religious environment, and you see all the positives that religion can bring to a community, and it becomes a very important part of your life, your society, your community, your family. Or you can rebel against it. And it seems...
Oh, guess what Kevin and the NWO did over here?
But it also seems to kind of go the other way around. Like, my friend growing up was the daughter of a vicar.
Right.
So I spent all my spare time, like, in church, in Sunday school, like, hanging out with the church community, even though the vicar himself was like, you don't have to be religious, you don't have to be Christian, you just come along.
And you're like, come off it, vicar. Where are the free dinners? I've seen the Vicar of Dibley Christmas special.
No, he was great. And he was just like, look, if you represent Christian values, as in be good to people, be a good neighbour, love people.
And I don't have to go to mass?
No, I didn't have to go to mass.
It felt like any discussion about, like, for me as a Roman Catholic growing up, any discussion about anything like that always just felt like a negotiation to, like, I don't have to go to Rosary. Like, just some sort of, don't have to, can I have Sunday back, please?
Mine was the opposite, because it was like, you get to go on fun trips with the church, because they were always doing fun stuff.
Right, I see.
But yeah, I think it can kind of work the other way around, in that if you are not raised religiously, I think sometimes, finding God can be incredibly empowering. Yeah. Especially if you've had a really tough upbringing.
If you felt lost anyway,
yeah.
And you feel like there's things lacking. I certainly know that, I'm not going to be Vince McMahon the heel in 2006 who sees people being brought, like, calm and spirituality by this newfound love of God. And I hate it. I want to crush it. I want more. I'm not going to go and fight God with Joe in a handicap match at Backlash, okay? That's not happening here. If religion and God brings you a sense of calm and purpose and all that, I'm so happy for you. I'm delighted. It's great, because I myself have seen many people, had many teachers, many friends who felt strong about their religion, and it helped them. More power to them. I also had a lot of enemies and a lot of dickheads who tried to use their religion as a stick to beat people over the head with, and they can go fuck themselves. Yeah. But what I will say is this, is that the gossamer thin armour of he's religious so he's allowed to think homosexuality is wrong, which dissolves upon contact with the air of living in the world. Like, I had so many conversations with religion teachers who were very nice and very well spoken and very friendly. And maybe because I was not gay, and we were talking about hypotheticals, that led into or very friendly conversations about it. But they would look at me smiling and go, no ill will against it, absolutely fine, but it is a sin, you will go to hell. And you could think that in the privacy of your own home and in the privacy of your own head, but that doesn't change the fact that if a gay person is thinking, this person thinks fundamentally my existence is a sin, that fucking sucks.
Yeah, that's not like a agree to disagree subject. No. That's not like, let's agree that our favourite movie is Die Hard, but yours isn't.
Look, let's just agree that Die Hard's a Christmas movie and your life is invalid, okay? Let's just agree to disagree, okay?
Your existence is a sin, and Die Hard's the best Christmas movie.
So, yeah, AJ has very, very strong Christian beliefs, even in the large realm of Christianity and wrestling. Because unlike a lot of Christians we have in wrestling, he's not born again. Yeah. He is, like, born. He is,
except he discovered it in high school. So...
I guess he discovered it himself, but when I say in wrestling, I mean, like, AJ Styles didn't have a successful wrestling career, fuck it all up, get hounded, by personal demons, and then, with the assistance of God and a church, managed to find their way, which has been the way for most born-again Christians in wrestling.
But it might have been that, his home life was extremely traumatic. It was, horrible to be there. He had an abusive father, and that maybe one of the few places that he actually felt welcomed and accepted was his local church, where there is a community.
Yeah, you
people...
describing the community around the church
so important.
Was like, what? This thing?
Oh no, it's honestly, it's like, and that was like, I think if there had been, if the vicar had been more pushy into pushing me into like Christianity, I probably would have become a Christian.
Because you love faiths.
Just because I love community. I love like getting involved with my societies and stuff. But like honestly, I think that's like such an important part of like organized religion. It's this idea of like, you know, even if you're not welcomed at home,
You've a place.
You've a place.
Yeah.
Which is again why it's so hurtful that then they dare say homosexuality is a sin. Like, fuck you.
I think like the way to convince oneself that it's okay that AJ Styles isn't on live stream saying, I think homosexuality is a sin, and he's at home thinking of that privately instead, or teaching his kids that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand why that's okay for some people. The fact that AJ Styles is not like kind of spreading the fucking gospel, let's just say, you know, in a very, very public, vocal way. I don't know if that makes up for the fact that he is still someone who is in a very, very, very high profile kids fucking hero position.
Yeah.
And I just think anytime someone who is in that position, I feel we owe it to our kids to have a little higher standard for them. Because guess what, folks? Them young ones, if you think we're bad, whoa! Wait till you get a load of the next generation, because they know how to find all sorts of shit.
Oh yeah, they really know how to use Google.
They'll listen to every episode of Talkin' Shop, and they'll ask even harder questions when in 20 years' time AJ Styles is considered nostalgic, and some of you and our children are starting podcasts about how great it was growing up watching AJ Styles. I'm just saying, it's like, you know, I don't think it's a free ride that AJ gets. I don't think that Christianity is like the kind of no, it's okay. And I think as someone who was never religious in you and someone who's brought up very much in the heart of religion, I think we can say that from somewhat of a position of knowing what we're talking about.
I don't feel comfortable saying I know what I'm talking about personally, just because I feel, you know,
I feel like I could have more of a go at him than you could, maybe.
Yeah, you can. I mean,
I might throw some scripture at him, like.
I will say on the subject of the whole homosexuality being a sin thing, it kind of can come back to the whole do your research, because like originally, fun fact, it never said in the Bible that homosexuality was a sin. It said that paedophilia was a sin, and they translated it and changed it to homosexuality so that they could have someone else to point the finger at, because a lot of people high up in the church are paedophiles. Yeah. So it was easier for them to go, look at those homosexuals, aren't they evil?
Joe, I remember having this discussion in religion class and being told, look, if you looked at any profession, let's take plumbing, and we looked at, there'd be some high-profile paedophile plumbers, obviously, so that means it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay.
So, yeah, not without going into the absolute fucking nuts and bolts of every creed and code of the Christian faith, but that is a big part of AJ, and in many respects, even though he had a troubled childhood, he has a somewhat very idyllic kind of school life. I mean, he meets his high school sweetheart Wendy, who he married in the year Wendy's been his squeeze since they were in like, you know, 4th or 5th grade.
Aww.
You know, married, have 4 kids with him. You know, the hometown boy. You know, that's as idyllic as it gets. You know, he has been blessed, I'm sure he'll say in his own words. So he finds himself leaving school, having excelled at all sorts of sports, notably not wrestling, because it was just like too much hassle for him. It wasn't something that clicked with him, but he was stand out. You know, he played football, he played athletics, he played basketball. So he was a very athletic kid. He goes to university, not with any great aspirations in mind, other than, well, going to university on I believe he was going on a sports scholarship,
right,
to train to be a PE teacher. He was there. I know, right?
Oh, he's such a PE teacher.
He's
oh my god,
big PE teacher enemy.
Can you imagine?
He seems like the type of PE teacher I had to tap on the shoulders. Can you stop telling all the bullies they're allowed to be bullies in class? And please never use the phrase "boys will be boys" in my classroom ever again, please. Yeah. PE teachers, you thought they were bad when you were a student. They're even worse when you're a teacher. But yeah, AJ Styles, he's got big drop and give me 20 vibes, huh?
Yeah.
Everybody's got to climb the rope, man. If you can't climb the rope, I guess you ain't graduating, man.
I can just imagine AJ Styles being your PE teacher and you trying to just debate them lightly in a subject that you know that they disagree with you with, and then they just put you in detention.
Yeah, pretty much, you know. So, AJ Styles, who avoided being a PE teacher and being surrounded by loads of orbs and balls for the rest of his days, which would have brought up some pretty awkward questions at one point or another, decides not for him. He drops out, heads back to Gainesville, just working regular jobs, did a bit of construction, couple of months, not much doing. His friends were like, hey man, let's go to the local wrestling show. They did. And he's there, and he's like, literally in his own words, I was so close to the ring, man, I thought, I might as well go in and do some stuff. And he, after the show, much like with Edge and Christian, just popped in, ran the ropes, did a few things. It's like, I will become a wrestler now.
What?
That's it.
Oh my
Watched
God.
a bit of GCW back in the day. And this is what I love so much about AJ, really, as the performer, and the fact that he's such an auteur. How many times you hear AJ, he's the new Ric Flair, he's the new Bret Hart, he's the new Shawn Michaels. This is a man who was unencumbered by any sort of nostalgia for wrestling growing up.
Yeah.
He was just super athletic, got into it, excelled, and was like, yeah, all right, I'll do it.
I don't agree that he's the next Ric Flair or the next Macho Man or the next... What was the other example? You said Shawn Michaels. I don't think he's like any of those.
Well, Paul Heyman literally said in 2018, he's all of those people combined, synthesized, and leveled up to a whole new ballgame.
No, I disagree. And I think AJ is a very gifted wrestler.
I think he is the most physically gifted wrestler,
But that's the thing.
athletically gifted of all time.
I think he's got like... He's like got the athletics of Shawn Michaels, but better.
Yeah.
But he hasn't got charisma the way that any of those other men have.
He's got charisma, but it's been a work.
Yeah, and it's not like Ric Flair, Macho Man, Shawn Michaels. They're all people who you could put on a microphone and you'll get some absolute, like, some of the best promos you'll ever see. AJ Styles is not that.
I mean, he's
fine.
I think the fact that AJ is now fine and has been fine since I think since 2014-15, I think AJ has been fine.
Yeah.
But I think the fact that AJ is fine now, it makes people who grew up watching him a lot like me, who had watched him struggle for so long, think he's great because he was really bad.
Oh, I see, yeah.
You know when someone is terrible and they get, I think Daniel Bryan is excellent now, but I think the fact that Daniel Bryan was so bad for so long makes me think he's even better now. Because I'm comparing him to that guy who also coincidentally was him.
Right, yes. So whereas I'm actually comparing them to the people you're comparing them to, which maybe is unfair.
Yeah. I think AJ has got perhaps a mindset of Keith Lee uses the phrase limitless, but I genuinely think AJ Styles is someone who never for a second... We think he was training in 1997 was when he started. That's when the Montreal Screwjob happened. And he's immediately doing high-flying stuff the likes which no one has ever seen. He trained for 1 year and then he debuted pretty much straight away for the people who were training him. And all immediately he was using all different indies all over the South. He was pretty much a big name.
I'm amazed he's so flip-de-doo, given that, I know you said he was, very athletic in his youth and he did, basketball and football and stuff, but, none of those things... It's a very different set of skills to, gymnastics or, cheerleading or something which involves flips and lots of jumps specifically. I don't know, it's so interesting. How is he so bendy?
I honestly think AJ has spent a lifetime practicing and owning his skills, and he also is naturally incredibly gifted. Because I think, naturally gifted is thrown around so much in fucking wrestling.
Yeah.
It's such a buzzword. And I think naturally gifted gets you in the door.
Right.
Hard work and training and everything else. And we talked about it in Gail Kim episode. AJ Styles is someone, even though he didn't grow up with it, has an undisputed love of wrestling. He fucking, as soon as he gets into it, he's hoovering up every little bit of wrestling he has. He's synthesizing styles. He's training other people. He's excited not just about his match, everyone's match. There's all these stories about everywhere he was all fingering all different pies, sharing ideas. And this is a crop of people he came up with in these indies. You're talking about the late 90s and early 90s. This is the King of the Indies era where you've got Christopher Daniels, Samoa Joe, you've got Daniel Bryan, CM Punk, Homicide, you've got AJ Styles, you've got Austin Aries, your favourite, Roderick Strong. You're looking at names that will become the backbone of supposedly good wrestling for the next 10 years, and now that's the backbone of WWE now.
Yeah.
So, I was wondering if you want to take any guesses at what AJ Styles' original ring name was.
Oh, God.
What would you call AJ Styles if not AJ Styles?
It's impossible to imagine him not called AJ Styles.
I know, right? Mr. Olympia.
Oh.
What a weird name.
It's a horrid name.
So weird.
That's what like Kurt Angle could have been called, but
Mr.
not
Olympia.
Not AJ.
Mr. Olympia is the name of the bodybuilding contest that Arnold Schwarzenegger entered. Like, so, yeah. AJ, how would you describe you? Because we're going to talk about some young AJ matches shortly, but the original AJ Styles as compared to modern AJ Styles, kind of a different look. How would you describe young Mr. Olympia / AJ Styles?
He has big twink energy. Like he's a very cute little young man.
How ironic.
I know, right? And he's handsome enough, I suppose, and he just looks very kind of like a very like typically white American.
Yeah, I think he's very much. You could look at him and go, "Oh yeah, that could be me," and not like a like
maybe to you as a white man,
because I had that exact same haircut in 2002.
But that's the thing. Like he's a video game protagonist. Like he is
male hairstyle 01.
Yeah, he's
default
a
color, please.
White guy with brown hair who is very famous and known. Like I think he's a very easy person to like put. If you are a white man, straight man, I think it's easy enough to kind of insert your identity onto him.
I do it all the time. It's great. Like
Yeah.
I was in Sin City last week. It was great fun.
Wow.
All the title characters I played. I think there's always that theory in wrestling. We talked about it in our Goldberg episode that if you look like someone that I could look in my row and in the wrestling show and I can see similarities, that's bad. Like I'm not gonna part with my money to go and see someone wrestle who looks just like a normal guy. But I think the fact that AJ looks kind of like a normal guy, and also he can do super duper 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 extraordinarily crazy things.
Yeah.
I almost think that makes him more spectacular, whether he realizes it or not. Like he looks very plain in the early days.
Yeah, I certainly think it's played to his advantage. Like if you think of other wrestlers who are as gifted as him, like they're all either like women or they're from minority groups, like they're black or...
I can think of two people who I could put forward and say I think they're as athletic as AJ Styles or as gifted naturally and have anywhere near the mindset that AJ Styles does. And I think it's like Ricochet and Casey Catanzaro.
I was going to add Kofi Kingston.
Kofi Kingston, yeah, because he has that kind of limitlessness
but I would say
him.
he's even better because he has the charisma.
But I would also say Kofi's got the asterisks of being in WWE his entire career, so I don't think he's had the opportunities to like even though he's known for doing cool, crazy things in WWE, it's not like he was AJ Styles who was out wrestling in front of 20 people doing shit. Like, AJ Styles is part of that crowd of people that changed what wrestling is, you know, and I think that's pretty impressive. Tiny little bit of trivia I found out. AJ Styles, I was like, I wonder if he got trained by anyone famous. His trainer, Rick Michaels, his only claim to fame was that he was in WWE for 1 year as a tailor.
Wow. That's really cool that you can move around careers like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, AJ Styles, within 2 or 3 years, he is already appeared for WCW, which was in its dying days. What a place to show up at WCW after Russo and Bischoff are gone. Like,
wow.
Great. He was like, would have been part of the group that I think that, what was it, Fusion Entertainment and Bischoff were going to use for the new generation. He was also in the XWF, which was Hulk Hogan's federation he ran until he decided he wanted to go to WWE. And he also was in the WWA, which is the terrible Australian promotion that I've been spending too much time thinking about in lockdown. So also made his way over to the UK a lot. And 5 months after joining WCW, the company went bankrupt.
Wow.
He was offered a developmental deal from WWE.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, way back then. And he turned it down.
He turned it down. Why did he turn it down?
Because he didn't want to move to Ohio.
Okay, that's fair enough. Because he probably already had family at that point, didn't he?
That was it. It was his wife. His wife was working as a teacher, and he didn't want to move. And that like, literally changed the course of his career.
Yeah, and it probably worked out for the best for him, because I can just imagine... I mean, maybe not. Maybe in this alternate universe where he signs with WWE, he becomes like a mega superstar and they push him to the sky. But, you know, I don't necessarily think that's a good... vision. That doesn't excite me. I'd much rather the world where AJ travels around all the different companies.
It's so much better off.
Yeah.
Like, he went off and he was able to flourish and develop his style, become AJ Styles, and all the people, like, he was so necessary for all these other people we've talked about who were elevating themselves, you know, and he was so necessary. like, say what you will about the company we're going to talk about a lot now, TNA, but if there was no AJ Styles, there would have been no TNA. He was the first signing of the company.
Wow.
He's the Howard Finkel of TNA, Joe.
Right. And as we said at the end of the Gail Kim episode, he was so supportive of women's wrestling.
And, like, making that company be, you know, TNA was called TNA when he first signed because tits and ass.
Right.
They had women in cages. Vince Russo was the head writer. It rose out of the ashes of the WWA and the XWF. You know, those grey hairs have been sporting around the house recently. Yeah, it wasn't necessarily a really forward-thinking, awesome place. It was a fucking bubbling swamp where he managed to go because they were like, look, we got Vince Russo. Obviously, it's going to be great. We got Jeff Jarrett and the big names. It's going to be great. We need some wrestlers. Let's get this AJ Styles guy. And then, like, AJ, who do you know? Who's good? And he brought in people like, you know, Christopher Daniels. He was working at the time in Ring of Honor, working with people like Samoa Joe in those original pay-per-views. So these people are being brought into TNA because AJ is told, you work for TNA, you're a contracted performer, but you're non-exclusive. So he got to continue being in the indies for the first, like, 5 or 6 years of being in TNA. That's a cool deal.
Yeah.
They should do that in all wrestling companies.
They really should, because there's no disadvantage to
Right?
a wrestler traveling around and wrestling new and different people. I think that's the biggest flaw of the WWE, is that it's like this little bubble of wrestling, a certain wrestling style.
Now, hang on, Joe. We get other companies, we put them in bubbles as well.
And then we get rid of them.
And then we, I don't know, remove the soap. Is that, you know...
Pop the bubble.
Yeah, basically, we make it so Evolve can't exist
Yeah.
anymore, but Austin Theory is still on television. Now, to show that, like, AJ was probably better off going to TNA than he was going to WWE. Like, in WWE, in his tryout match, like, you know, he lost his tryout match. They put him in a dark match where he lost to the Hurricane. The Hurricane, if you remember seeing on pay-per-view Classic recently in the Royal Rumble, not exactly a very strongly booked character.
No.
So like, AJ just would have been like a kind of a cruiserweight guy, someone to lose to Tajiri, you know. So he's in TNA. He is booked as the first X Division champion, and the X Division will become the cornerstone of what makes TNA very special. Now, the X Division is where we saw that original triple threat match back in the day, Joe, and we've seen it a few times. I was wondering if you could tell me what you think the X Division is.
I have honestly no idea. Is it some kind of like mini wrestling tournament?
Okay. What, like kind of like a G1 type of thing?
Yeah.
Because it's got cool letter in
Yeah.
there. The X Division. So, Joe, the X Division. There's not weight limits. There's no limits.
Okay.
I don't know if you know what that means necessarily.
So there's no weight limits?
There's no weight limits.
So that's like normal wrestling then.
Yes. I think weight division in wrestling is the least well-explained thing
Yeah.
ever.
Especially seeing as they seemingly lie about a lot of wrestlers' weights.
They do. You're very, very much want to know the weights of various wrestlers all the time. I'm like, you'll never find out. And the problem is that you can use me when we go to live shows as like a benchmark, because I'm exactly 2 meters, you know, 6'4" to 6'5", and I kind of, you can slot me against all your favorite indie wrestlers in the UK, and you can be like, I know how tall you really are.
Yeah.
You know, you are not 6'1", Pete Dunne. But weight is a total unknown.
Yeah.
The idea of the X Division was meant to be, you were going to see flip-de-doo type of wrestling, like the type of wrestling you would normally see in cruiserweight wrestling, but not just with cruiserweight-sized wrestlers. So you'd see people like Samoa Joe do flip-de-doos, or I think it seems like it's a stupid point to try and explain to you now, because all wrestling is this now.
Yeah.
But 15 years ago, it wasn't, you see. And that was very special for us.
So what, 15 years ago, only small wrestlers were allowed to fight small wrestlers, and only big wrestlers were allowed to fight big wrestlers?
More or less. Like, if you're anywhere towards a main event or a high-profile match, you were going to be a bigger wrestler. Like, you know, traditionally Vince McMahon didn't like his smaller-sized performers.
Right, I see.
Even though you were getting, like, you know, Rey Mysterio was the exception to that rule, but we all know how that went, as covered in our Rey Mysterio episode. So, there's a great thing going on here with AJ Styles. He's allowed to bring in, you know, folks from all around the world, because you're allowed to work part-time for TNA, work for any other indie, which means Ring of Honor is sending in loads of cool people, and that takes us to this match. The first time, I believe, I may have seen Samoa Joe growing up. One of the greatest goddamn matches I saw from my childhood, and I was very adamant you were going to see AJ Styles taking on your favourite boy, Samoa Joe for the X Division title at TNA Turning Point 2005. 15 years ago.
So did you see this in 2005?
I did.
Wow.
And it blew my goddamn mind. Hence by the fact that when Samoa Joe was coming out, I was like, huh, look at his towel. His towel's got blood on it. Now, you know I love me a towel in wrestling.
I know, you love a towel, yeah. Yeah, Samoa Joe, he's got a disgusting, gross towel. It's a white towel, and it's got blood on it.
It's gross, Joe.
It's very gross. And this is why, pro tip, you have a special non-white towel for when you're on your period, so you don't stain the white. You don't use your nice white towel, okay?
Yeah.
For those days. Okay?
Same with your dyeing hair as well. You're going to get sick.
You got to have a special period towel.
Yeah.
And that's what I think, for one, I think it's important to have representation. I think a wrestler should come out with a special period towel.
And this is why Samoa Joe, he and I quote, destroyed the X Division code. Because he used the nice towel. That was what the X Division were going to use.
That's
as
the
a
guest
treat.
towel.
It's the guest towel that I secretly use myself. God damn it, Joe. So, were you happy to see Samoa Joe again?
Oh, of course. And I'm very happy to see little young JoJo Samoa Joe.
Samoa JoJo.
Yeah.
Why is he very JoJo in your estimation?
He's got very JoJo hair here. Like, he's kind of got like a bit of blonde, kind of, not quite streaks, because it's very short. So it's kind of like blonde patches.
Yeah.
And he's got these very beautiful JoJo eyes with the long lashes, like full of sparkly bits, like an anime.
Yeah.
And he just seems like very posy if you've not seen JoJo is a very like stylized anime. It's very beautiful, but also very masculine.
So I think Joe has got that. He's got the beautiful masculinity.
Beautiful masculinity, which also would make a great band name.
I was going to say a tag team name. Beautiful masculinity. That's fucking brilliant. Ooh, I might ask Adam and see if he wants to hit the circuit, Finally, a gimmick I can get over. So, I mean, if he is Samoa Jojo, then AJ Styles has got to be like Attack on Titan.
Yeah.
Flipping around, somewhat generic looking, incredibly exciting. You dig far enough, you discuss about it long enough, you'll find out it is actually problematic. And as much as you don't want it to be, it is. He might need it to be explained to you as all.
Yeah.
So, there is a special graphic at the start because it's an X Division match, Joe. It means that there's no limits, but we also get the X Factors.
Yeah, they had a written recap on screen that like summarized a bit of the story, and one of the lines on it was, Samoa Joe has no respect for the X Division code.
The X Division code, which must be adhered to at all times.
They didn't really make clear what the X Division code was.
So, from what I could gather, because the X Division at the time featured a lot of standout performers from Ring of Honor, I believe that the X Division code may be code for the Ring of Honor code.
Right.
Which is that you're to shake hands at the start of the match, you respect rope breaks. It was like, we talked a bit about it, I think, in our Daniel Bryan episode, the idea of this kind of more pure form of wrestling, that they weren't going to do, ball shots and, pull on the ropes, and it wasn't going to be about who's the sneaky baddie, it was about pure wrestling. But they were saying because Samoa Joe was so violent that he was disrespecting the X Division code.
Right.
My precious code.
They tricked me.
They tricked you?
I thought there was a big AR sign. I was like, wow, TNA in 2005 are doing what WWE are only doing now. That's amazing. And it looked like a big TNA sign and AR. It was like spinning around.
Quickly, let's find some Brian Zane videos where he criticizes TNA and talk about how ahead of time they were. You should respect TNA. They had AR technology before it even existed. They schooled the 3DS so many years before it came out.
No, it was just a sign.
It was just a sign, and in fairness, the exact camera angle you would do if you had an AR sign.
It looked so like AR. It really did. I mean, they fooled me.
Now, have the 15 years been kind to AJ Styles in terms of the look, the ring gear, the entrance? What did you think of a 15 years younger AJ coming out here?
I mean, he's a wee boy. Yeah, he's a cute little twink boy. I don't remember his ring gear jumping out at me, especially.
He had the big hood.
Oh, he had the big hood. He's always had the big hood, has he? Yeah, I mean, it looked a bit silly, to be fair. The older matches of his where it kind of like was too big and not shapely enough.
Yeah, it
Like-
was formless.
Yeah, like these days he's got the big hood, but I think it's been crafted really carefully, possibly by like engineers.
But like, I'm amazed at AJ Styles, given that he wrestles quite a high octane style. Looks fucking grand. Like he doesn't look like he's aged at all. He looks a very healthy man for someone who's in his mid-40s now.
The thing that surprises me is apparently he's had very few injuries,
Fuck all. Like Bret Hart levels of no injuries.
which is mad. Like at least with Bret Hart, he didn't wrestle a style that kind of was I don't want to say dangerous, risky.
Less room for error.
Yes. And the fact that obviously he grew up, you know, he was literally from the moment he was born, he was being wrestled by bears and fathers and all sorts in a dungeon. Whereas AJ, he got into this later on in life.
Now AJ, he certainly hasn't hurt himself. He has hurt other wrestlers, though.
Ah, okay.
And I think that is something that's maybe worth bearing in mind. Whereas, like, Bret Hart had a super safe style that protected both him and his opponent. AJ Styles has a style that can be worked safely. However, it's, you know, it is high risk, and it's high risk for both. No more so than his finishing move, one of my all-time fave moves that only until it went wrong I realised how dangerous it was, the Styles Clash.
Right.
Where you pick someone up for like almost like a pile driver, where they're picked upside down and you've got your hands around their waist and their legs are going up by your head, and you hook their arms over your legs and you fall face forward.
Yeah.
So their face, chest, stomach, groin all comes face into contact with the mat.
With the opponent on top of you.
Yes.
So you're kind of squashed.
Kind of scary.
Oh, really scary. I think out of all the wrestling moves that exist, that's the one I would least like to receive.
And much like another move that looks killer and is actually killer, but you wouldn't realize it because everyone takes it super safely always, the pedigree from Triple H, where again, you are being placed down with your arms away, you're prone, being slammed straight into the mat with someone's weight on top of you. Now, what's happened a few times with AJ Styles, I remember happening to Stevie Richards, who's someone we would have maybe seen very briefly on an ECW episode. But I remember him once doing it in TNA where he did the Styles Clash and Stevie didn't duck his head in time, and literally you could see his head bend with his body as he was being landed, like prone, head out, just horrible. So AJ has got some pretty high octane moves, and they have injured some people. And I think he has been beaten with the stick of like, oh, well, it's dangerous, so we shouldn't be doing it. But if you think really about what AJ does and how safe he has been, I think he has to be considered one of the safest wrestlers to work a style like this ever.
Oh, really?
Because how many times we were watching stuff where you're like, look how late he's tucked his head in. Like, he's literally tempting fate here.
Yeah.
I mean, it is quite a risk. It seems very risky, yet he seems so confident and in control always.
Yeah, I mean, as always, I feel really, like, silly even talking about this because I don't know what I'm talking about. But yes, it looks to me, as someone who doesn't really know anything about wrestling and has never wrestled in their life, it looks very scary. Like he leaves it to the very last second to tuck his head underneath when he does things like the Styles Clash or any move involving his neck.
There's a move very early on in this match which we were like, oh, and I think every single match we've watched, including all the extra bonus viewing, we have simply seen the spot went, oh, which is where he does them shot off against the ropes, and he does the big drop kick where he whacks him and then he flips right back and he lands right on the ground. And every time he did it, we were like, what? And every time it looked like he was going to kill himself.
Yeah.
That's pretty... I don't think I can say just because something looks scary that therefore it is scary. It probably is that AJ is so confident doing these moves that there's no risk factor at all. But I imagine it's thinking like that gets you injured.
Yeah, I'm guessing so. And then you see some moves which look like the most boring, simple thing that looks like something I could do. And it's like, oh no, it's really dangerous. It ended the career of like this legend. It's like, you don't know.
Yeah.
I think even wrestlers don't know a lot of the time, you know, until an injury happens and it's too late.
So you have always been very upfront about your love of flips. Something that's been a more recent development in the podcast that you've been enjoying is selling, and those who are actually quite good at selling. And it struck me as quite odd that AJ was someone I remember being said a lot, like, oh, he doesn't sell because, you know, he does all these crazy moves and he just gets up and he does a big flippy dip or whatever. But I was really impressed by his selling in the matches that we watched.
Yes, me too.
I don't know what it is about AJ that makes him quite sympathetic when he's being beaten up. Is he incorporating the flips into the sell? Is that it?
I mean, he definitely does. Like, I'm thinking of, like, the match we watched with Samoa Joe here, there's a moment where Joe gives him a arm strike or something, and then AJ just like does like a backwards somersault. It's like, it's so silly and over the top.
There's a part where Joe kicked his legs out from underneath him.
God.
Whoa!
And like he uses his flippiness to accentuate his selling, which I really like. But it's not just that, because like that alone wouldn't be enough. That's not selling. That's just like, I don't know. I'm sure, like, The Rock, for example, I think you could argue doesn't sell, but does do the whole...
he does the big silly flip.
Yeah.
But your main takeaway is, look at that silly flip. It wasn't, wow, he hit him super hard.
Yeah.
Whereas AJ, I think, a lot of times, particularly, like, in match series against bigger opponents, he uses his athleticism to make you kind of go, Jesus!
Yeah, what a big impact that was. And then he has the facial expression to match. Like, even though I don't think of AJ Styles as being, like, particularly charismatic or good on the microphone or anything, like... I historically always thought that was the same skill as like convincing selling, but it's not. It's a very different skill, and that's evidenced by the fact that I think AJ is very good at this style of emotive selling. But like, I think if he was given a microphone then and tried to like talk that through, I'm not sure he could.
We've often picked up with the bugbear of someone who's very verbose in the ring, and that's not reflected.
Yeah.
You know, on the microphone or whatever, or they're very verbose. You know, all the time they're talking on the mic, but when it gets into the ring, they're quite quiet. And that was a criticism with Edge, that he was very mouthy and then not very mouthy when they wrestled. So you think AJ is like the first to the opposite of the case, where he seems very charismatic and at home in the ring without a microphone, but he can't back translate that.
It's not even necessarily that, because it's not like he's being mouthy in the ring. He's not. Instead, it's more like he's able to act through his body, but not through his brain.
It's because, is it like he does things like a Ric Flair flop type of, is that it? Like that he falls in ways that are novel or something?
I mean, kind of. I mean, I'd say it's more like Shawn Michaels in that match against Hulk Hogan. Like, he's just really over the top, silly, like... But, like, not in a way that's, like, making fun of anyone or burying someone. It's just literally, like, I'm going to make you look fucking awesome. Yeah. And, like, there's a match that we watched ages ago and then again today, which is him against John Cena. And when you've got someone who's so big, and again, it shows well in this match because Samoa Joe is a big boy, it's so impactful seeing someone slight and small like AJ just going spinning off into the sky like Team Rocket blasting off again. Like...
It is absolutely incredible, and even if you're very familiar with these men, I would say, you know, this is available for free on the Impact Wrestling YouTube channel. Seek it out, because they're so, like, it's both men. It's like Black Tar heroin versions of both men, like it's S-star versions. When Samoa Joe picks up AJ and he spins him into the barricade.
Oh, Jesus.
It's actually a move I believe we saw in the Gail Kim episode. It's funny to see stuff that both of them were doing.
Oh my God, you're totally right. Yeah, Samoa Joe literally swung AJ into the metal barricade and like smashed AJ's head into it. There was a lot of stuff in this match which I kind of felt, I don't know how... Like, I asked you when we were watching, I was like, is this a wrestling match or are they beating the shit out of each other? Because it looks to me, as someone who doesn't really know any better, it looks like they're just beating each other up. Like, it sounds that way too. Like, there's a lot of like smacks.
They're doing their job very well then.
Very convincingly. But then I know sometimes when I watch matches like that, it's because, they're actually beating the shit out of each other. And other times it's because they're very good professional wrestlers.
Well, from my experience in watching wrestling, when wrestlers decide that they legitimately hate each other and want to beat the shit out of each other, or is more often the case, one wrestler decides that they don't like the other and they decide they want to beat the shit out of them, it doesn't make for a lot of very entertaining stuff here. But what you do have in this instance, in this match, is those cases where two guys are really, really, really good at making you think they're beating the shit out of each other. And yes, there happens to be a few errant strikes when they get a little bit too into it, because AJ does get busted up in the mouth here.
Yes.
Joe's like, you know, he's got a few grazes, and like they look like they've been through a bit of a war. And I think with wrestlers like this, they're happy to like, yeah, fine, you know, slap me on my chest. I don't mind if I burst blood vessels. You know, it's only my chest. Like, it'll be fine. I'm not going to stop me from wrestling tomorrow. So that's where you're seeing some of that Japanese style. Because you turned to me at this match and you were like, is this a strong style match or is this like a lucha match? And I was like, it's all of those things. And we talk about how, you know, the WWE style is like this synthesized style now, where you get a bit of that groundwork from Europe, a lot of submissions. You see the strong strikes, the fighting spirit stuff from Japan. You see the acrobatics of Mexico, and then you see the morality play of American wrestling. As Chris Hero really beautifully put this together. goddamn, if you're not seeing this here in 2005, I think this is maybe what the X Division is. It's taking all that stuff from around the world and making a super fun, cool match out of it.
Yeah. So I actually have 2 top spots in this match.
Whoa, Joe.
My first top spot is AJ Styles standing on the apron and Joe just fucking kicking his leg out of his leg. That's the only way I know how to describe this.
He flipped upside down. It was incredible.
It just looked just horrible and amazing, and it was so impressive.
I can't begin to state how much I'm realizing that this match is like so responsible for like my entire non-WWE fandom.
Yeah.
Because I was watching TNA for around a year at this point, but like this match, I think what's special about this is this didn't just get me into TNA, this got me into Ring of Honor. Because you're watching the wrestling channel back in the day in the UK, and it'd be like, you'd see Ring of Honor would be advertised, but I'm like, I'm not going to watch that. It's a dusty old weird looking show. And then I see this, and it's like, these guys are from Ring of Honor. I'm like, oh, I'm going to go watch that then.
Yeah. My other top spot was the moment where Samoa Joe swung AJ into the metal barricade.
Ugh, that was absolutely disgusting.
I do feel a bit bad because both of my top spots were within like 30 seconds of each other, and both of them were Samoa Joe beating up AJ Styles, and this is an AJ Styles episode.
That's true, and I think you were so entertained by the match. I think there was a moment where you were like worried about like, is this too much Samoa Joe? Because I mean, the story of the match is Samoa Joe's like, he's been undefeated for 6 months. He hasn't been beaten yet in TNA. He's a scary outsider they've brought in. AJ's the champ. He's the best the company has to offer for the X Division, and everything AJ tries doesn't work. He keeps getting countered and beaten up and all that. And yeah, it is. Tired brain would say that means it's just Samoa Joe. You know, the enlightened, more wired brain from
or the galaxy brain,
or the galaxy brain, which is when you're on your period and you have galaxy chocolate, and it makes you feel a lot better. that brain is telling you that it's both, because I've seen Samoa Joe beat up a lot of people and it be boring.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, and I've seen AJ Styles be beat up a lot and it be boring as well.
Yeah.
So these two guys have got a very fucking special connection. They just work beautifully together.
They really do. Like, it's not often I watch a match and I get the feeling that two competitors are friends, but I really do get that feeling that AJ Styles and Samoa Joe, even though obviously I think they come from very different backgrounds, I just feel like they have this respect for each other professionally.
And I kind of feel I could watch this match and turn and go, there's an argument to be made for writing down everything you're going to do in a match. Or I could turn and go, there's an argument to be made for just doing it all on the fly. And feel, I couldn't tell you if what was planned and what wasn't. It just felt so like an organic fight. The moment where AJ Styles did something that I'd previously seen 15 years ago, but I swore to myself 15 years later was impossible, was the weird running moonsault.
Yeah, I've got that as a note. Yeah, I wasn't even a top spot because I think I was in so much shock. I just couldn't even type it anymore. I think
the same way a book that you used to do a book report about can't be your favorite book, though, because you spent too much time analyzing it.
Exactly.
We spent a long time looking about this.
He ran forwards and jumped over the top rope, but
on his sideways, right? He was sideways.
Was he sideways?
He managed to jump sideways but forwards.
No, he managed to do a backflip, like
which
a moonsault,
is also backwards,
while moving forwards. Which is like, I don't understand how you do that, because like surely doing a moonsault or a backflip or something, it pushes that your momentum is the opposite direction from forwards, and yet he was able to not only travel forwards but travel upwards and forwards over a top rope and then clear the top rope and land perfectly on Samoa Joe,
and safely as well, mind. It was incredible. And I've spent many times in my sometimes I get these weird anxiety dreams where I think I'm gonna like fall off a very high place and sometimes in those dreams I'm like, oh, tuck the legs there, make sure you don't hit the rope or anything like that. The weird thing about it was that I spent a lot of time thinking about hypothetically what it would be like to do a flip like this, and thinking in my head what it would. I mean, I've rolled down hills before, right? I've rolled backwards by mistake. And then we were watching Jackass last night. You were watching Jackass like the first time we've been watching it recently, and there was a part where they're doing a loop-to-loop on the skateboard, and Tony Hawk is like explaining to someone you can hear, and he's like, and when you're going through, just follow through like a roller coaster ride. It's one big long loop, and you don't even feel like you're upside down. You don't even know when you're upside down. Like, oh, that helps. I'm like, how does that help? Not knowing when you're upside down? And so that's made me think, like, look, don't try and empathize or understand the fucking star people who can do backflips and moonsaults, because it's just not you, Kevin. It's not for you to empathize with or understand.
I mean, the closest I can get to relating to this is I had a trampoline growing up, and me and my brother spent a lot of time on it, and I can do a backward somersault on a trampoline.
Okay.
I
Well, now you say, when did you last do
Okay,
this?
fair enough. Like nearly 20 years ago.
Okay. It's just always worth to bear those in mind.
But even still, I don't understand how you jump forwards
And
over a
backwards.
rope while jumping backwards like that. Don't know. Like physics breaks as far as I'm concerned at that point.
There's a very strong case to be made that AJ Styles, the person, is simply an avatar being controlled somewhere else by an avid gamer.
I have a theory that AJ Styles is actually a drone, and that's why he is so impressive.
Yeah, that's very true, and that's why his beliefs are so easily programmed into him.
Yeah, because AI is always like racist and homophobic.
It's true. I can't recognize black women's faces, man. I don't know nothing. Springboard moonsault backwards DDT.
I don't even know what that is.
That is a move that AJ does in every match in 2005. 360 degrees sell from when Joe gives him a kneeling clothesline. He kneels down, and in the kneeling space, which is lower than normal, AJ manages to find a window to do a 360. How?
I don't know.
And the greatest, most AJ Styles moment ever, after he gets all this ass whooping, all this shit happens to him, every moment he does something spectacular to fight back, Joe just catches him and smashes him. He kicks out at one and goes, "Dial!" Yes, AJ.
We have a great visual when Joe gets the coquina clutch on AJ, and AJ's like bleeding so much from the mouth. It's fucking gross. But I love Samoa Joe's coquina clutch is so scary, but it's like even more scary when someone's like frothing blood from the mouth.
And when you do the clutch, anytime it's someone who thinks they're about to flip you into some move, because they do it where like he's rolling up Joe and he's going for the tights, and as he's rolling him up and turning back, Joe's just like, yoink, he gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh my god, it's so fucking brilliant. And I love seeing anyone who's caught in like, you know, a hold where you can see the visual of their face and it's very like distressing and whatnot. But the fact that they do this thing where AJ's not even facing the ropes, Joe's facing the other way, and AJ just put his hand out going, bleh, 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 and he's so close, and he doesn't even realize how close he is, and he just passes out. Fucking amazing. I can't believe how well this match is aged. This was like me literally going back prepared, as I am most always prepared, to realize the thing I loved when I was a teenager wasn't as good as all that, and fuck me, it was even better.
Yes, it was so good. So after the match ends, because it's TNA, I guess, we have a bit of a weird finish.
A little bit,
So-
which I opted to not explain.
Joe beats up AJ some more. I really like...
After feigning that he was going to follow the code.
Yes, that he was going to, like, stand him up and shake his hand or whatever.
And then he beats up AJ, to which Mike Tenay goes, "No! He's obliterated the code!"
I really like that, and I wish they'd do this more often in the WWE, that they keep ringing the bell, even while Samoa Joe's, like, obviously, like
like
not
that.
done. I love that. It was, like, kind of like, come on, Joe.
Turn the lights on
Yeah.
and off. Stop now.
And then Joe is going to hit AJ Styles with a chair, but a barman runs in.
Yeah, that
Looks like Baron Corbin.
that was Christopher Daniels, the
Oh,
fallen angel.
Christopher
Joe.
Daniels. I should have known because he looks exactly the same.
What, like a barman?
No, it's like he looks exactly the same as he does now.
Yeah, which is pretty damn impressive.
Yeah, like 15 years ago.
So, two people you're obviously very familiar with, but were you surprised in any way to see that AJ was at this level 15 years ago?
No, I always heard, like, before he even joined the WWE, AJ Styles was one of those people like Kenny Omega or someone who just, like, everyone talks about how they're a legend. Yeah, they're just so good. So I had really high expectations when he signed, and he lived up to them for the most part, really.
So you had high expectations for this match where I'm like, hey, it's your fave against the guy we're doing an episode about, and it's like one of my favourite matches ever.
I mean, one thing I was intrigued by was whether or not he'd be even better in his youth, because that's obviously we've done a lot of episodes on wrestlers that have retired or that are past their prime.
Yeah.
And you go back and look at their early stuff and they're either not as good or they're much better.
Yeah.
AJ just seems very consistently as good. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I feel maybe I don't know enough about wrestling moves to be able to say if he gets better or worse, because it's so beyond my level of comprehension.
Yeah.
It's just I don't even. I'm just very impressed and happy to be here.
So, with AJ, I think what is intriguing about him is that, like, in watching this match, some things I picked up on, which is like, he will just chuck out a phenomenal forearm as like a move. You know, that's just a thing he does. It's part of the offense.
But not his finisher.
Not his finisher.
Okay.
And there's certain moves, like that thing where he does the moonsault, he catches you in a reverse DDT off the ropes. I don't think he does that as often as he does back then, but he still can do it. I don't think it's a case that AJ can't do any of the things that he used to be able to do. I think it's the case that AJ probably works a little bit smarter now,
and I think
a little bit, you know, more like that he knows he'll be retiring within the next 5 years.
Yeah, and I think the WWE as well, it is slightly less encouraging to do this super innovative, like, you won't see
Ricochet
this...
has struggled compared to AJ, whereas AJ, like, they made the phenomenal forearm, I think, is one of the most spectacular finishers in wrestling. If you told me in 2005, you're gonna make his finisher be the phenomenal forearm, are you kidding me, man? This is bullshit, man. Take the gloves off, man. You know, he is, I think he is a little safer, or a little bit, not necessarily safer, maybe he's just more aware of when to bust out the big moves.
Yeah.
And he does bust them out on those random occasions, and they are ecstatically brilliant.
Well, I suppose that's, like, to the benefit of the WWE as well, though, because, like, they expect their top talent to wrestle, like, 300 days a year or something. So, you know, if you're wrestling this, like, over the top, actually quite risky style, you're a financial risk to WWE as a company. So they want you to wrestle a slightly safer, more controlled style.
And in those moments, I mean, you mentioned Cena and AJ, like, that was the definition of a match, and like a lot of his matches with Roman as well, where I'm like, well, he's against Roman, he's against Cena, so even though it's a big match, I'm not going to expect him to do any of this stuff. And he would do stuff, like, he did stuff in those matches with those guys that I would have been surprised if he did back here.
Yeah.
You know, and that's it. So I don't think it's a case that AJ can't go like he used to. And if he can, he's managed to hide that with polish. So I have beaten around the bush quite a lot. So what's the star rating for that one then?
No stars. I hated it.
No stars.
Rubbish. Don't watch this match. I gave it 5 stars.
Wow!
Perfect match.
Wow!
Literally loved it so much. Honestly, everyone needs to watch this match. It's so good. And I'm a little biased because I love Samoa Joe. He's, like, my favourite wrestler, so, you know, slightly biased. But also, it's a fantastic match. It's just hard hitting. It's like, there isn't much of a story in this, at least that I could recognise, but it feels...
undefeated guy against last chance to defeat him, like, you know.
It felt very cinematic, even though it wasn't cinematic at all.
Yeah, not like TNA, grand-sized audience, it's in a sound stage, so you've got a level of production value, but it's not like the fucking fanciest looking thing, or like the biggest crowd, or anything. It's just a really great match that I'm so glad lasts the test of time. I can't remember the last time you had a perfect match.
I know, me neither.
Wowzers trousers, how about that? A perfect match. I think it was a good one to pick for us to look at first, because I don't think I suspected that you wouldn't be thrilled to watch lots of AJ stuff.
Yeah, I was a bit hesitant.
But it certainly got us off to a really good start, because I think it invigorated the watching experience for sure.
Yeah, definitely, because we started off, I think it was the first thing we did of our work day was watch this match, and I had it with my morning cup of coffee, and I was like immediately like bright and awake and alert, like, oh, I'm looking forward to today's events.
So AJ Styles, even though he was kind of the X Division guy, very early in his career, I mean, you know, 2002 and 3, they experimented with putting the World Championship on him, and it was around about this time that there was kind of a back and forth between the different people who were running TNA. People like Vince Russo thought that AJ could be good as a world champion. People like Jeff Jarrett viewed that people like Jeff Jarrett might be better, and AJ should maybe stick to the X Division. So it became quite frustrating to be an AJ Styles fan, where he was this guy who seemed very obvious like he was ready to be a top guy. I mean, by the time we'd seen this match, he was already a world champion. So it was very frustrating, much as it was with Samoa Joe, that there was this guy who you were presented with as being like the fucking best, kick-ass, and then they kind of twiddled their thumbs with him.
Right.
And AJ has been someone, like a lot of people in TNA, you're there for any length of time it happened, unfortunately. Lots of different people come in. Some people get you, some people don't. Some people use pushing you to prove a political point. Some people use burying you to prove a political point. AJ struggled a lot in terms of his character and his direction at times, even though the matches were very, very reliable. I thought I'd list for you some of the teams and factions that AJ Styles was a part of during his 12-year tenure in TNA.
Okay.
And I want you to figure out if you know if these guys are good guys or bad guys.
All right.
Okay? Firstly, the TNA frontline.
That sounds like good guys.
Yeah, they are. They were good guys. And this was a really cool storyline. The TNA frontline was Samoa Joe, AJ Styles, Christopher Downs, a bunch of like the original guys. Like, we came in, we were the original X Division wrestlers, and now people like Sting and Kurt Angle and Scott Steiner are coming
Old
in.
men.
Yeah, they're coming stinking up the joint. They were the main event mafia. And they're like, well, fuck you. We're gonna have a stranglehold in this business forever. Enjoy Kevin Nash versus Booker T. No. And so he was in the TNA frontline, and that storyline didn't really work out very well. They didn't actually get to finish it properly because they changed over. But it doesn't matter. Here's another one. The Angle Alliance.
The Angle Alliance. Something with Kurt Angle, I'm
It
guessing.
is. It was Kurt Angle's alliance.
I'm going to say good guys.
No, they were bad guys
Oh, really?
as well. They were, because Kurt Angle was a villain and he surrounded
Right.
himself with all these people to be part of his alliance to make sure that he had the belt and no one else was to take it from him, you know.
Okay.
The Christian Coalition. What do you think that group is, as a matter of interest?
I don't know, because I don't know enough about TNA to know their attitudes towards Christianity.
Right.
Because, like, in some companies, Christianity is treated quite seriously and it's kind of, like, respected. And in other companies, it's not so much, e.g. when Vince wrestles God.
Right, so if this is WWE, it's like, here come the Christian Coalition King. They like to call them the Christian Coalition. What type of a group would the Christian Coalition be in WWE, do you think? Goodies or baddies?
Oh, I think they'd be baddies.
Yeah? Okay. So in TNA, for the few matches we've seen, what would you reckon? This is before Hogan and Bischoff would have been there, if that helps at all. This would have been when you would have had a bit of Jeff Jarrett and Dutch Mantel and maybe a bit of Vince Russo in there.
Oh, Vince Russo. I mean, I don't know the other two, but Vince Russo makes me think it would be bad guys.
Bad guys?
Yeah.
Born again Christian Vince Russo.
Oh, he's a born again Christian?
Yeah. We talked about it in an episode.
Totally forgot about that.
Yeah, he doesn't really talk about it a lot now.
I guess good guys then.
They were bad guys, but
Oh.
the Christian Coalition was a group of wrestlers who were designed to help keep Christian have the World Heavyweight Championship and to protect him. It was just unfortunate that AJ Styles, the noted strong Christian, was in a coalition for just a wrestler called Christian. He was also in a group called Sex.
Okay.
Sports Entertainment Extreme.
I bet they were a good guy.
No, they were baddies.
They were bad?
They were baddies, yeah.
What year was this?
This was 2002. This was when... well, although AJ did feud with Sports Entertainment Extreme, I should say, he ran into their locker room with a chainsaw and called Disco Inferno a homophobic slur.
Oh.
That was 2002, you know, in fairness.
Wow.
It's a different time, wasn't it, you know? Okay, last one. Fortune.
Good guys.
They were, and then they became bad guys.
Okay.
They were Ric Flair's group when Ric Flair came in and joined with them, and they were... Oh no, they were bad guys, then became good. Then they became good guys, because Fortune was Ric Flair's group, and he wanted them to be like the Four Horsemen. So there was like 7 of them, and it was AJ Styles and Nigel McGuinness and Frankie Kazarian, you know, like the Four Horsemen.
Right.
And they'd all hold up the number 4, and Ric Flair would go, woo! But then they became good guys.
Right.
So AJ's been part of a whole bunch of different groups, and let's talk about some of the fun storylines that AJ had. Do you know that he once accidentally married Kurt Angle's wife?
I have heard this, yes. A couple of tweets mentioned this.
Did they?
Accidentally marrying Kurt Angle's wife. I've no idea the circumstances surrounding it.
Right, I watched the segment and I remembered it, and I read the press release where it's like AJ Styles accidentally marries Karen Angle. So AJ was the best man for Kurt and Karen's wedding that they were having. They were renewing their vows because they were bad guys, and that's what bad guys do.
Okay.
And AJ, it was suspected that AJ had a little crush on Karen Angle, or Karen Angle had a little crush on AJ Styles. And of course, this is really fun to do because this was coming just around the time that Karen Angle was going to leave Kurt Angle for real.
Oh, that's nice.
And start a family with Jeff Jarrett.
Oh.
While they were both in the same company as well, which was... That was a good to do. But one was, Samoa Joe came out and he interrupted, and in the ensuing brouhaha, they accidentally got married.
Okay.
You know how that happens.
No.
Accidental. You come in, it's like, do you take Joanna Gray to be your lawfully wedded wife? And then someone comes in, there's a big dust up.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, you're married to Adam.
Okay.
Like, I think we should have contingency plans, given that we're wrestling podcasters, when we get married, to make sure this doesn't happen.
I mean, God, yeah. Historically, wrestling weddings have not gone very well.
No, it's true. It's not like one time Taz turned heel in TNA in a wedding as well. Like, so all sorts could happen.
We're definitely not inviting Taz.
And another thing which was happening with AJ in the kind of the intervening years when there was lots of back and forth and people coming in and out is that they were a bit more comfortable with using AJ as an actual honest-to-goodness character and not just one who was a wrestler who was going to fight for titles and stuff like that, because they felt, particularly when Hogan and Bischoff came in, they were like, well, we need to have a little bit more story, a little bit more personality, make him a bit more relatable, right? Like in the Attitude Era, which is why we had a storyline where we thought AJ Styles might be cheating on his wife. Now, we were very fortunate enough to be sent lots of footage of the Claire Lynch storyline, and I think seeing we're going to be spending so much time talking about great wrestling, we have to talk about some of this other stuff as well. Joe, the Claire Lynch storyline, as we were very happily sent many clips of it, but very fortunately, Brian Zane had done a great video about it, so we're able to cut it down a little bit.
I'm going to need another cup of coffee.
Okay.
To talk about this.
Okay.
Because my brain is full of fluff.
Do the right thing, Joe!
I want to do the right thing.
Do the right thing!
Oh, God, I feel like I need a nap and I've not even started
Come
this
on.
Claire Lynch bit.
Claire Lynch, baby, let's go!
Okay.
Okay, Joe, you're refueled. You've had a chance to think. The Claire Lynch saga, where did you get up to with this?
What do you mean, where did I get up to?
It was an example of AJ being involved in a kind of a real life situation, kind of, You'd be
So
watching
confusing.
TV, kind of going, wow, what that definitely happens all the time.
I will try and summarize it best as I can.
Okay. Because it didn't start off with Claire Lynch.
No, it was very confusing, and bless him, Brian did the best he could trying to explain this, but I still don't really understand what happened.
Okay.
So, AJ Styles was spotted with Dixie Carter, the owner at the time of TNA. And there were pictures of them in secret going into each other's apartments, kissing.
Ooh.
And then it turned out that actually they weren't having an affair. They were actually both going to this other woman's hotel room. And this other woman was called Claire Lynch.
Yeah.
And she was a drug addict.
Dun, dun, dun.
Now, I don't know why that meant that Dixie Carter and AJ Styles had to make out in front of her room.
Because AJ feels very passionately about the angle in response to it.
Right.
His original idea with it, him and Daniels and Kazarian came up with it.
Wait, it was their idea?
The three of them together. The original idea was that Daniels, who was the baddie who had kind of lured away Kazarian and was like meant to be this bad influence, and like he was AJ's former friend, that they were going to blackmail AJ by saying that he was sleeping with the boss. And the idea was that it was going to be that AJ, like, there was all these questions about his family. Like, is he sleeping with the boss and all that? And they were going to develop it from there.
Right.
The idea was that he was ultimately going to be that AJ was not sleeping with his boss, because obviously AJ is very sensitive about doing stuff like this because he's such a family man
yeah.
and all that. God first, family second, wrestling angles third.
Yeah.
So that was the idea. It was going to be like a playoff of the whole, they're sleeping their way to the top. But they wanted to put it on its head, being like, well, what would happen if a male wrestler who's been very successful could be accused of having slept their way to the top? And they're going to say, like, you were the first guy who was signed here, you young little AJ Styles, and that sexy cougar Dixie Carter, she's obviously, you've been sleeping your way to the top for years. And like, I thought that on paper, elevator pitch wise,
Sounds fun.
that is definitely an interesting avenue to pursue.
Yeah,
because
it's new. It's not been done before.
and we're also very big proponents of any time we get to swap the gender roles that
Absolutely,
have been used over and over and over again. But they thought that, no, gotta go for a little bit of an alternate hilt on that. We're instead going to bring in the Claire Lynch story aspect.
So, yeah, this is where it gets confusing. And it's still not really been explained to me why AJ made out with Dixie if they were actually helping Claire.
I'm not sure if those pictures are meant to be ambiguous, but they
were
seem
not.
so like he was doing it. And the fact that they never bring it up again.
Yeah.
But like TNA were quite comfortable with doing this themselves at the time. Like they had, somebody like Kurt Angle, his wife left him. They had like problems as well when Jeff Jarrett had marital problems. They happily let them play out on screen.
Right.
When they had this whole thing like where Jeff had gotten together with Karen, he was there like drunk in a bar going like, "How do you think my life's working out, man?" Or they did a thing once when like AJ. They had this thing that AJ had become like dark-sided, and they're like, maybe he's using drugs. And they cut to his house, and it was like Wendy's like, I don't know what's wrong with AJ. He's not playing Xbox like normal. he's been really strange. And then like they cut to him in the background like blurry, and he was like obviously hadn't shaved and had like a little like he had a dirty weekend of kebabs. And he was like, get out of here, man, go, no, don't look at me. So I think TNA very much has figured out that personal drama, yeah, but how to actually depict that in any way a realistic manner, they hadn't figured that much out. Hey, at least not making people run over people and give them fictional DUIs to go on their real DUI rap sheet.
That's true.
But Claire Lynch was not your typical addict, Joe.
No, nor was she your typical wrestling guest, in that she was not a wrestler, had not done any work in wrestling. She was an actor, and her background had mainly been in corporate acting gigs.
Yeah.
Which is about as far away from professional wrestling as you can possibly get, while still kind of performing a similar role.
Be our guest, a decision you'll regret.
So Claire Lynch comes in, and it starts off that like, oh yeah, she's this drug addict, but then it turns out that she's got a baby.
What?
And then it turns out that the baby is AJ Styles' baby.
What?
And
he's like, check my tattoo, man. Ain't no record of it. Come on. Ridiculous.
But she has pictures, for some reason, of her. It seems like she's date raped him.
Yeah, because AJ doesn't, in real life, AJ doesn't, well, they say doesn't really drink.
But he doesn't drink.
But he doesn't drink. So they're implying that he got date raped. And
yeah, and there's all these pictures of him on like looking very unconscious. You can see his tattoos and everything, so you can tell it's him. And then there's Claire kind of leering over him with the camera, like, yeah, look at me. And they've got like a bottle of whiskey in front, like. As
someone who's done his fair share of like little bits of corporate work here and there, I can imagine what it would be like in terms of going somewhere where you're given a vague direction and then week on week it seems to be getting a lot spicier. As in, you know, you think you're just there to talk to people about Mother's Day, but next week you're there to talk to them about all sorts, you know. I wouldn't put up with what I think Julia was her name was the actor who played the, because 1 week she's a drug addict, the next week she is she's pregnant, and the week after that she's a schemer and a date rapist, and it's like okay, layers to this Claire Lynch woman all of a sudden.
Yeah, I felt really bad for her.
Yeah, because I don't think she was a wrestling fan, Joe.
No, she wasn't. She didn't know anything about wrestling, and apparently the fans, unsurprisingly, were really nasty about her. And obviously, like, because she's playing a drug addict in this, they've like used hair and makeup to like make her look quite like tired.
Disheveled.
She's a good actor as well, so she's able to act in a way that like, you know, makes her seem quite like, again, like run down, exhausted.
Well, they
like,
cut
desperate.
to her in the crowd. She'd look at AJ's matches for a few weeks, and she'd be there, like, you know, tears streaming down her face, going,
or, like scowling and.
Yeah, it's like obviously not a good look if you've got this character who is both screeching and yelling, and also is manipulating and possibly a rapist. It's not
a good look for a pregnant character, really.
No, we've come a long way from a hey, let's spin some of these old gender roles on their heads. No, not like that. Not
like that at all. And so yeah, apparently she got like death threats and all sorts, and she
because in wrestling, when wrestling fans discover something, it's usually one step away from someone's life being ruined.
Yeah, you know? Pretty much. And all the wrestling fans were like, oh, she's minging and I hate her and she should fucking die.
Well, of course they'd say that though, because every 2 seconds you literally had AJ Styles going, Daniels, what the heck I've been doing with Claire Lynch? She's a foot, man. I ain't gonna be hanging around her. Yeah. I mean, Dixie Carter's a very sexy, successful woman, and that obviously is very understandable. Hey guys, would you think and let's all talk about how sexy Dixie Carter is.
I mean, she is sexy, obviously.
It's besides the point, Joe. That's what the Real Housewives of Nashville is for. So yeah, AJ kind of comes across as being both a victim but also being the most heartless, mean fucker ever, because he's like, I don't want no kid, man.
Yeah, and he doesn't make it clear whether or not he's actually disputing his fatherhood of the child.
He's disputing whether or not he'll look after the kids.
Yeah, but then later on, so then the actor who plays her, and I don't know her name, I'm not even going to bother to Google it, because as far as I know, after she left then...
And she scrubbed herself online.
And she scrubbed herself. Yeah. She changed her whole online identity because it impacted her commercial acting career, which is really sad. And yeah, that sucks for her. Her reputation was forever tarnished, and every time you Googled her name, it came up with rape and death threat.
It's not just wrestlers who TNA can ruin the lives of, and fans. They can do it with normal people as well. Anyone.
No one is safe. So, yeah, she leaves, and then that's when it gets kind of really a bit. I think obviously they didn't know what they were going to do now.
Unlike before, where they definitely
very
knew what,
clear.
They're very clear.
So they bring in a lawyer, and the lawyer says...
The lawyer is meant to represent Claire Lynch, and the lawyer is like, I was contacted by... She's reading out a statement from Claire, and she's like, I was contacted by Mr. Kazarian and Mr. Daniels to frame AJ Styles. She basically admits to doing everything.
Right.
Which... held a plea deal. I don't know if she got a suspended sentence for that. Like, yes, I faked a rape and faked all this stuff. Like, I made him think that he had a false paternity, and very odd. When like, if you're gonna bring in the real world into wrestling, God, you've got to bring in some of the realism with it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what the fuck? This would make the Dominic Mysterio custody battle seem like a procedural drama done very, very well by comparison.
You know, it's funny, wrestling is often referred to as being a soap opera with violence. And I think a lot of people involved in the day-to-day booking and production of wrestling would benefit a lot from actually watching some of the classic best soap operas like EastEnders. Because, like, if you want to do realism and heavy drama...
crushing realism.
Like, yeah, look at especially, like, British soap operas, because they are so gritty and realistic but also silly.
Yeah.
And like, honestly, I think wrestling could learn a lot from that.
Well, I think that's what happens when wrestling is still drawn from like Maury and Jerry Springer, like, which are like
reality TV show.
Yeah, I mean, it still shows there on TV, but if you're saying that's the zeitgeist and that's what like everyone's familiar with, it's not. It's like when you in your 20s and 90s maybe relate to it, but you in your 40s in the modern era don't. And I think that's kind of a big issue. And like TNA is a weird company in that it would often be presenting you angles like that, and at the same time be presenting you with like some of the best wrestling in the world, because they had a stacked roster. But it is kind of sad that AJ was again another casualty of when Hogan and Bischoff came in and took things over, because AJ, up until them coming in, was I believe at the point he had several title reigns under his belt. He was the longest reigning world champion up until that point. And like literally right before Hogan and Bischoff come in, they're headlining the pay-per-view with AJ Styles versus Christopher Daniels. Like proper fucking, like this is 10-year TNA stuff, two guys you've known forever. It's a big storyline based on friends being betrayed and two guys being there forever, and one guy's career excelling and the other guy's career not doing so well. So we decided to look in somewhere where we get a nice mix of story, but also some of that in-ring, where we have AJ Styles taking on Christopher Daniels, the Fallen Angel. This is a TNA's Final Resolution 2009 for the TNA World Championship. And I was wondering if you had thoughts, if any, about top guy AJ Styles on the microphone. Obviously, we saw him in Claire Lynch and in the recap package of this. Is he a believable voice for you?
No, he's not very good. He's he reminds me of like a 12-year-old boy who's just borrowed his parents' video camera for the first time. Like, he's really trying hard, bless him. But he doesn't, I think he's trying too hard to be cool and doesn't quite understand, like, the elements of what makes someone cool.
I think he has gotten to his point now where he can do promos.
Yeah.
But I think if you look at how AJ does promos, look at his eyes. Like, AJ's much more comfortable backstage with a microphone on him looking off into a blank void, because he'll never look anyone in the eyes. He's always like, whoa, man. And he just kind of looks off to the stars. Kind of like how Randy Savage used to. Where it's like, if I tell myself I'm confident and I put on this persona and I just kind of go, man, and then let the words come.
Yeah.
And I kind of think he is still a little marble-mouthed, but he's probably better than, like, not as good as Shawn Michaels, but certainly not as bad as Brett was at points in his career.
AJ is fine. He is, and he doesn't need to be amazing. You know, we've got other people who are far better on the mic and less skilled in the ring, and it doesn't matter. It's the beauty of wrestling is everyone has something different to contribute.
What is interesting, though, is seeing this here, where they're like, this is Russo in charge, and they're kind of confidently saying, like, this is what TNA is, and this is what it will be. And then just when Hogan and Bischoff come in very quickly, it's like, nah, it's not that, and it never should have been that in the first place. Like, these guys are a little, like, I hate that vanilla midget term that was being used, and it was still being...
What does that mean?
It was a term used by some of the perennial big men superstars like Hulk Hogan and Kevin Nash of the time to describe people who were very technically, athletically gifted, but very small and lacked any sort of substance or personality or character of note. And therefore, vanilla midget, because they're small. They're good for a little bit of, like, you know, they're good for like something different to have on the cards. you know, but it's not something that could be a main event or anything like that. So it's sad to see them here trying very, very hard, knowing that it's ultimately completely futile. And here's the thing that's happened with AJ as well. And I only found this out a couple of days ago. He still technically has that contract that says you can go anywhere in the world you want, AJ. You want to go to Ring of Honor? Fine. As long as you're not on TV, you can go anywhere you want.
Wow.
He still has that. But he didn't appear on any of those shows, like, pretty much at all. And the reason is because, according to AJ, they priced him out. They had a clause in his contract where they could set the minimum amount to pay him to show up on a show. Every year they brought it up.
Yeah.
So here he is in 2009, he's the world champion, but you can't go work any of the shows on the weekend, AJ, because
no one can afford you.
No one can afford you because they're going to pay $5,000 for you because that's all the money they have for all the wrestlers. So it is interesting to know that those really horrible tactics where it seemed designed to kill someone's spirit and passion exist well outside the mind of Vince McMahon.
Yeah.
Fucking shit.
Yeah, it's a real industry problem.
It is. Taz on commentary, Joe.
Oh, yeah.
How you getting on with Taz these days?
He's in AEW, which is cool.
Yeah, Joe's a big AEW fan, folks, if you don't know.
Shut up.
You are a big AEW fan. Lots of nice things to say.
WWE is just bad at the moment, so by comparison, it kind of makes me an AEW fan.
He's an AEW fan. How about that? I mean, in fairness, that's because AEW are excelling in empty arena wrestling.
Yes.
Which it's been a challenge to watch.
Yeah.
And if you're unaware, folks, it's been so challenging. We started a new side series on Patreon where we have Joe setting a brief for a classic pay-per-view to review. We've had a lot of fun. We've done Halloween Havoc 95. We did Royal Rumble 2002. And then my co-host and life partner, Joe Graham here, decided to put a rewards tier on Patreon saying if we got 450 backers, Billy Keeble, who has, by the way, nothing to do with this show, for some reason gets to pick the pay-per-views. So that's what we'll be doing this one.
Of like people who listen to How To Wrestling.
Who's this guy?
And who don't listen to the Ashton podcast. Like, what?
Yeah.
Why do we care what he thinks? So, okay, for listeners at home who don't know what Billy's deal is, Billy has weird taste in wrestling.
Putting it mildly, yeah.
Putting it mildly. He was once referred to as possibly a hologram, which I think is the most accurate way of describing Billy I've ever heard. And Billy he's known in the Ashton podcast, isn't he, for having strange tastes.
Let's just say that he would be proficient in finding the wrestling that I have went out of my way to try and steer you away from for most of this podcast. So, yeah, we'll have that to look forward to.
It's going to be good.
So, Billy's got 3 picks which you can vote from. That's available now at patreon.com/howtowrestling. The series is available for all $5 backers, but because we're idiots, anyone can vote on it. So you can just head over there, vote, scream into the void, and know full well that Joe's going to have to watch something like, I don't know, fucking New Year's Revolution 2006. So there we are. But yeah, we've got a big difference to WWE here. So again, at the start, we got the tail of the tape, where they just list the guy's finisher, the number of times that they've been champion and things like that. I like the little bit of extra information that they're providing.
I know, you're a data head.
I'm a data head, Joe.
I liked the pre-themes, as you called them.
Yeah, this was very, very interesting little bit of presentation.
I really want this in wrestling, full stop. I want it.
How would you describe it? Like, because I think most people don't know what this is.
So, like, in wrestling, you have entrance themes, obviously, where once you make your way to once you, step onto the stage, your music will start, and you'll then walk down the ramp and into the ring, and you do a bit of a show.
Unless you're Goldberg, then the music starts pre-concussion in the locker room.
Before you headbutt the locker. But here, they had this bit where they, like Goldberg, came out of their dressing room and then walked backstage to, the gorilla position. Only that bit had its own music.
It's like bed music, basically.
Yeah.
Like it referenced the main theme, but it was non-intrusive.
Really cool. I really, really liked that. And you know what? It got me thinking again about exit themes.
Like Mankind, of course,
Mankind,
yeah.
I just think there's so much work that can be done to wrestling to make it more theatrical.
Yeah.
And I think, that's such a little easy fix that I think will make a big, big difference for newer fans like me who just want to come along for the performance and the big fun.
The theatricality.
The theatricality, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well put.
I like that TNA goes through several changes all the time visually. Like, to think there's only 4 years since the other match we looked at, and even the lighting is so different. It's like blue almost. Like they changed it looks like you've had a good fiddle with it on Instagram, basically. basically.
Yeah,
Like,
you've
I've
added a
given you an
filter.
ugly picture and you've changed it around a bit. I can't say I know which I prefer. If I prefer the very bright, open kind of feeling of the original 2005 Impact Zone, or this kind of like blue space zone that they're in for this one.
I mean, it's context specific, I think. It depends on the mood of the show, the
Yeah.
mood of the storyline, the feud, the wrestlers. I think, again, going back to the theatricality of it, I would love it if in wrestling pay-per-views, each match had different types of lighting depending on what type of match you're going to get. Like, you know, in AEW, if you have a comedy match, you obviously want it to be like very well lit, so
For the
you
main
can see
event, you bring
everything.
down the lights.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Something dramatic. You have like the audience all in darkness. Yeah, I think there's lots of cool things. You have a spotlight even. Can you imagine a wrestling match with just 2 spotlights and they follow them around the ring? How cool would that be?
Oh man,
How come that's not been done?
That's brilliant. Empty arena match, folks. Once we get fans back, let's get them back out again. That
Get
sounds
them
like
wrestle in the stadium, well at the chairs with a spotlight on each of them. I think that'd be fantastic.
they look really cool.
It would look so cool.
Oh man. So I was gonna ask you here because it feels like this is like in many ways peak AJ, but it's just before he's getting the soccer mom hair.
Yeah.
AJ Styles in this form. You mentioned that he's got twink energy.
Yeah.
Is he a hunk?
Oh.
Oh, now come on, you've got to answer me this. Is he a hunk?
Oh.
Oh, now.
I don't feel I can answer this question.
Yeah. I mean, we've had a discussion about my distressing straightness earlier already. I feel like you've if anyone's got a gaze here that can say something about it.
No, because my issues on hunkiness are particular.
Okay.
To me, a hunk is a gender neutral term.
Yeah, we've said
Yeah.
it as such here. Yeah.
Which has no bearing on what actually someone looks like.
Okay.
Because
it's an energy. Is that what you're saying,
it's
Joe?
an energy.
It's
a
hard to
charisma.
define.
It's an X factor, and it's entirely personal. Like there are
Okay.
people like Randy Orton, for instance. I wouldn't have said historically as a hunk, but I can't deny that to some people he is. Same with like John Cena. Like I personally,
For me personally, the hunkiest thing is a problematic wrestler recognizing the error of their ways. That,
I mean, yeah,
it turns me on,
He's
especially when
definitely-
it's an icon like Randy Orton.
he's definitely gained some hunky points for like recognizing and apologizing for his
But
actions.
I never know what top, because at the end of the day, I was making an egg sandwich for me and Joe, but at the same time, I was also putting chili in a slow cooker.
Yeah.
And that was apparently hot.
Yeah, it was hot. But like, I appreciate that my sexuality is a bit strange, and
Yeah.
what I find hot isn't what most people find hot. So,
And
you
this is
know,
your treatise on why you're about to tell me that AJ Styles is not a hunk.
he's handsome, but to me, he's not a hunk, and part of that is because like he hasn't earned the title of hunk.
Oh,
and
I see. Well, if there's an asterisk in your head, it makes you think about other things. They can't be a hunk.
Yeah, like I just don't think it's fair. Like, can you really be a hunk if you're homophobic? I don't know if you can be.
You brought up a point earlier today. You said you wanted to mention it. You said perma heel and perma face, and now I think this may bleed into this discussion, because I think Daniels is a good counterpoint here, because Daniels looks a lot stereotypically more evil with the kind of he looks like the baddie from The Mummy Returns.
Whereas I'd be much more comfortable saying Christopher Daniels is a hunk than AJ Styles, even though I don't know much about Christopher Daniels.
I mean, I would say Christopher Daniels is probably more in alignment with your values than AJ Styles is.
Yeah, I would guess.
But that would be fairly low bar to entry as far as I
Yeah.
know. I mean, would you consider yourself part of the Fanials, which is the Christopher Daniels fans? That's my fan club I've coined, the Fanials. Look, you've only got a few years left in your career, Fallen Angel. You want to start calling us the Fanials? I'm down if you are. Because actually, I say Christopher Daniels, they changed his name in this match to just Daniels.
Daniels, yeah, very WWE.
Yeah, what happens? You get Daniels when you got a couple of guys named Daniel. That's their stable name.
Daniels.
They call them the Daniels. But you say he's more of a natural hunk. But the perma heel, perma face.
Yes.
What did you mean by that?
So, this is slightly off topic because I'm not sure if it's going to come up here.
Okay.
It was when we were watching the John Cena AJ Styles match that got me thinking about this new term I've coined, which is, and I think it best describes someone like Cody Rhodes. I would think of Cody Rhodes as a perma heel, in that it doesn't matter whether he's a heel or a face. To me, he will always be a heel. He just comes across as a bad guy.
Okay.
And AJ Styles is the same. Like, even when he's playing a face character, there's something about who he is as a person that is not very likable, and he brings that out as a character, which makes him come across as a heel.
And you're totally right, because I think on this podcast I've used so many times the example of, like, heels who have got spectacular offense and why that works against them. And I always use like the AJ Styles, like in TNA, they struggled with that a little bit at the start. But like AJ's been heel for as long as I can remember now on TV, and it kind of feels like, yeah, him being heel seems so natural.
Yeah.
It seems so right that if you used to turn him into a face, I'd be like, no, keep him heel, yeah.
Yeah.
Seems right.
And obviously you can change your mind. Like, I think I would have historically said Sami Zayn and Bayley were a permaface, but they are definitely not so. They've proved that they can be both.
Oh, so it's not just the case that this is the case that someone can play a character, and even though they themselves as a person are very nice and a very good person, that can't be so much to ruin a good heel character.
No.
In the same way that someone being a piece of shit can very easily ruin a good face character. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Intriguing. I would say most people are probably of a similar viewpoint.
Like, I don't know much about The Rock, and I know he's supposed to be a good guy, but I'm pretty sure any match I watch with The Rock, because of what I know about him and because of the way his character is like cool and edgy,
Yeah.
I think he's going to be a perma heel to me. Like, I just don't think certain characters, the way they have acted in the past, the good guy behavior has not aged well, and therefore the actions that would have made them a face in 15 years ago makes them a heel now in
Hulk
2020.
Hogan, perma heel.
Perma heel, yeah.
He's a heel and a hypocrite. Jesus Christ.
Also a racist.
So the story of this, two guys who came into the company well at the beginning of TNA, the original X Division stars, King of the Indies way back in the day, wrestling in gyms in front of no one. And one guy is the world champion who's been like the longest reigning world champion for a long time now. He's constantly named as the best wrestler in the world. And the guy who came in and was like the little bit more of a veteran is now seeing that his career is just not as good. And Daniels has been in and out of the company a few times. It's a really, really cool story. Very, very simple. And I think if you're going to use people's real life career frustrations, I think that's a respectful enough way of doing it without making him seem like he's a total putz for losing his job all the time.
Yeah, no, I think that works.
Most of the match is like one step aheadness, where like they know each other so well they can predict what's happening. It was a slightly slower pace of match than a lot of the other AJ ones. I think that's why some people wanted you to see this one.
Yeah, a lot of matches that AJ has, one of the reasons I really like them is that they start off very fast paced and then they kind of slow down and then they pick up pace again.
Yeah.
And there's something about that formula that I really like. This one didn't do it so much for me.
Because it was back, they wanted to show you back and forth.
Yeah,
like,
they were
he does
building.
a thing, yeah,
and I think, again, maybe I'd be very interested to hear from people who maybe have been watching wrestling for like a similar length of time as I have, or even less. And that, is it because I don't know the wrestling enough that doesn't appeal to me as much?
Yeah.
Because like for me, it's like the kind of like the showmanship, the whole spectacle of things that I really like. So when they like, obviously you really liked this, like this whole
I do. I love this
slow
match,
build up of like almost like a feat of brains or whatever.
It was like a chess match.
Yeah, it was like a chess match. Yeah. And I think that's the perfect analogy, actually, because, similarly, if you aren't a chess master, a chess match is going to be really boring to you, and you'll be like, okay, so what? They played a game of chess. I don't see what the big deal is. But if you know all the moves and what's possible and you understand the game, it's really exciting for you because you're like, he's just done a really famous move.
It's like why you enjoyed some of that guy's Sudoku playthroughs you saw on YouTube, but not most of them.
Exactly.
I think I totally get that. I think there are different genres of your wrestling match, and I think AJ, even though a common critique, which I think was completely wrong, much like with the Young Bucks, just a lazy kind of like, he only did these spot fest matches, and there's a lot more kind of cerebral matches like this.
Yeah.
And these are always very noteworthy when the crowd seem quiet, but then all of a sudden they just go, "This is awesome," out of nowhere. It's like, oh, okay. Like, because I think there's a couple of movies we've watched recently where as I was watching them, I would have been like, I'm not loving this, but they got their hooks into me.
Yeah.
And therefore I paid attention, and it kind of just slowly dragged me along with it. And I think this match successfully did that. But I don't know if it would be the case that it would do it for everyone. It's not everyone. If you see Styles and Daniels, you would expect perhaps more athleticism. There were some real, like, innovative... I need a thesaurus think of other words for innovative for the AJ Styles episode, but these two guys who I've seen wrestle so many times, both as opponents, both as tag team partners, both as opponents in tag teams, but there was a couple of things they did in this match that really made me go wowie owie, like when they did the monkey flip into the turnbuckle.
Oh god,
that was AJ has a way of crashing into things.
Yeah.
Like back first.
It's like when he gets knocked over or pushed or like given an Irish whip or something, he like speeds himself up.
Yeah.
He's so confident, I think, with this is me again. There's gonna be so many disclaimers in this episode of I don't know what I'm talking about. I think he knows the ring so well that he's able to confidently fling himself at the ropes and know I'm going to be caught, or I'm going to land right here, or I'm going to bounce back in this way. Because he's able to, like, in a way that lots of, like, newer wrestlers, I think a big criticism that we have of them running the ropes is they have this hesitation of, like, oh, owie, the ropes hurt. And, of course, they do. They're horrible. They suck. But he almost, like, is totally the other way. He, like, he runs at them. He, like, throws himself at them. Like, no fear. Like, you can't watch an AJ Styles match and think about how much the ropes must hurt to run into.
No.
The way that you do with, like, newer wrestlers, and you go, yeah, I'm conscious of that fact.
Because he's so like a video game in many respects. And I think, you know, he obviously is very good at selling. We've said that. But I think that doesn't take away from the fact that he makes things look a lot easier than they actually are. I'm kind of glad I wasn't 10 watching AJ Styles. It's bad enough I was imitating Mick Foley and, you know, Al Snow and Hardcore Holly, but Jesus Christ, there but the grace of God. At least I was only trying to do an elbow drop off a tree. I wasn't trying to do a fucking 450, like.
My brother reminds me a lot of AJ Styles athletically, in that my brother is like one of those freaks who's just like
can do anything,
gifted, like he just knows his body so well and can do whatever. He used to like jump off roofs all the time and things. If he had watched AJ Styles matches, he would have broken every bone in his body. It would have been so ridiculous. Like it's funny that like all the whole home warnings, like do not try this at home, happens to all like the chair shots and stuff, but not like the really fun flip-de-doo things that kids obviously do on their beds. Which is like still really dangerous.
You had a trampoline, oh my
God. I know! And you think of all the other kids who had trampolines and were wrestling fans. My parents, I don't think they would have let us have a trampoline if we had watched wrestling.
Yeah, I think that would have been a trade-off.
Yeah.
The most horrible moment in the match is when AJ is kind of, he's thrown himself into the ropes, he's all kind of caught up, and he's hanging out to the outside. I think he just wants to show that he's very discombobulated. But then there's a moment where he genuinely, I think, loses his footing and he's like, shit, and he lands right on his head and face.
It's horrible.
The
it's
noise.
Really scary. Yeah, really nasty.
It was probably like 5 or 6 inches, the drop, but it's just because of how prone he was.
And also the fact that, like, it felt so sudden.
Yeah.
Like, I've been fooled by AJ doing a move deliberately that I thought he had done mistakenly, but actually was on purpose.
Yeah, I think this has to be a mistake. No one would land on their face. No one would face plant on purpose. It looked so sore.
Yeah, and like the way his neck moved as well, like it's just...
Yeah, no absolutely horrible.
Yeah, there's a lot of really nasty spots in this.
There's a backbreaker into the turnbuckle as well, which I really enjoyed. And there was a lot, I will say, for as many things where like it looked disgusting, there were a number of things where it's like, oh, that looked disgusting, and then upon rewatching, you're like, oh, actually, no, that's very safe. It just seemed like it was a lot more dangerous than it was. There were lots of times where they just played off what you thought was going to happen. Like, you know, Daniel's going for a Hurricane Rana when they're in the ring and he hits it, but then when they're outside the ring, AJ catches him and gives him a dirty powerbomb. Like, you thought that would happen inside. Some beautiful attempts into the Styles Clash, and you had like Daniels crawling while in the move into the ropes.
Yeah.
Now, knowing how dangerous that move is, the idea of literally moving around while someone is holding you and moving backwards and shimmying and they can't fucking see you.
Oh, it's so scary.
Yeah, it is more than a little bit.
There's a moment where they get thrown to the outside of the ring, and Taz says on commentary, he says, the padding does nothing to protect these wrestlers
it's a
from
very
the concrete.
Very thin mat. It's almost non-existent.
He literally said they were landing on bare concrete. And then you can see the landing mat. That is blatantly not true. Now, I'm not saying that landing on a mat is, like, comfortable or anything, or, like, nice.
No, it's horrible. It sucks. But, you know, you were like, he jumped onto concrete in ECW.
Yeah,
What's he
exactly.
talking about?
That's obviously what he's saying. It's why they didn't bother with padding in ECW, because it just doesn't do anything.
Yeah, it was about getting dirty. That was the real worry when you were thrown to the outside instead. Christopher Daniels...
Sorry, and then he says, it's not ballet. And I fucking hate... That's my least favourite trope in wrestling, is when they say, it's not ballet, ladies and gentlemen.
This ain't ballet.
Yeah.
Well, they say it ain't ballet. Now,
You fucking dare say that to a ballet dancer.
Yeah, I mean,
I dare you.
a friend who only did ballet like now and then and hated it,
Yeah.
and even they were pushed beyond their limits.
Yeah.
So if you're remotely professional, no, this ain't ballet, because I will say ballet is probably way fucking harder. And that's not taking away from how incredibly difficult wrestling is. It's just that, seriously, folks, ballet ain't soft.
I remember in school there was this rugby kid who made fun of this other kid who was in my dance class, and he did ballet in his spare time, and he was like, yeah, fucking ballet's for pussies. And the kid who did ballet picked up this rugby lad who was like fucking twice his size. Fireman carried him over his shoulder, like did like a leap. It was
Amazing.
Like, fuck you.
I
can do this.
I want a ballet wrestler. I want a
That'd be so cool.
a badass motherfucker. Some like Dominic Dijakovic looking big scary motherfucker. They let this big fucking Russian ballet dancer. They're gonna fuck you up. I think we have a whole stable of ballet performers.
That'd be so cool.
Yes, please. Christopher Daniels has a maneuver, Joe, and it's called the BME, the best moonsault ever, where he jumps from one rope to another and then very picture perfectly does a lovely floaty moonsault.
It's very good.
Is it very good moonsault or the best moonsault ever?
I don't know, because I've not seen all of the moonsaults in the world. I don't feel like I'm qualified to comment.
Are you impressed by? I mean, because you've seen Christopher Daniels in AEW, right?
Yeah, I like him a lot.
You like SCU?
SCU, yeah.
You like? Were you surprised to find out like how long his career has been? Like how he's been wrestling for like nearly 25 years at this point?
I was, given that he's not. Has he ever been in WWE?
He would have shown up for a few like dark matches and
Right.
tryouts and stuff.
Do like the WWE? Do they just hate bald people? Is it like after Steve Austin, they were like, no one else is allowed to be bald. We're
Okay,
only him.
Goldberg, you're allowed to be bald. Kurt Angle's bald.
Oh yeah, that's true.
You know, I think they more hate small wrestlers. I think, and particularly in the he would have been coming up in 98, 99. They wouldn't have
It's
had
so
any.
bad. Like small to me does not mean Christopher Daniels, who's
No,
like
he doesn't
6
seem
foot.
doesn't
tall.
seem small at all, does he?
No.
It's I think like it's starting to happen now where I'm noticing there's a generation of younger fans where they're like, these are small.
But no, those guys are massive.
Yeah, and
Big Show isn't normal.
No, and you know what works really well now is that now that we slightly, because of the likes of AJ and Christopher, fair fucks these ads for plowing through and being sacrificial lambs to be in companies like TNA that didn't understand them for so long, just so they could stay on national TV, so they could get the point across that size doesn't matter like that. Because we just watched Backlash 2020 where they're like Drew McIntyre and Bobby Lashley, two giant monsters. Now in 2006 they would have just been very normal guys, but the fact that they can build that now as a clash of titans, that's good.
Yeah.
Because when you get somebody even taller, you can build it as something else.
Exactly. I don't understand this whole.
Why do you think all my podcasting pals are tall and one or two of them are short? It makes us look better, obviously.
That was, I think, the strangest thing to me as a new wrestling fan was the idea that WWE don't sell their big stars, like as in physically big, as like, look at these monsters. Instead, it's like, look at these normal wrestlers.
That guy's too small.
That guy's too small. Yeah, instead of like, just like, that's such a boring way to approach something that's like physical. Like,
Yeah.
just so boring.
Christopher Daniels and AJ Styles, what could we have here was best described as a 12-heart event because they know each other so well. We have a roll-through Styles clash and then a second rope Styles clash. Only possible if you know Daniels' favourite thing to send him in the mail.
Right.
These guys know each other super well. AJ Styles picks up the win in what would go down as like one of like kind of TNA's last attempts at having its own ideology and its own brand, because what would happen after here was that you would have Hogan and Bischoff trying to make it this weird combination of other companies from the past, and it has struggled to regain its identity since. But it is amazing to look back and see, like, in 2009, that TNA, for its faults, had AJ Styles firmly as its top guy, and that was a company that also had Sting, Kurt Angle,
Wow.
you had Nigel McGuinness, all these top names, and they were like, no, AJ's our guy. 12 years, though. You can imagine that's a long time to be with the company.
That is, yeah.
What did you think of this match? You said you weren't as big of a fan of it and you didn't have top spots.
So, there's a couple of bits I want to talk about before I get to my rating.
Yeah.
So I've got a question, and I've also got a comment.
A question, a comment, okay.
Yeah. So, my comment first. there was a move that AJ Styles did just before he did the Styles Clash off the top rope that you loved and were very impressed by. And I missed it, and then you went... Well, I didn't miss it. I saw it, didn't understand really what happened. I mean, you rewound and showed it to me again, and I still couldn't understand why it was impressive. What happened?
Springboarded from the ring apron to the ropes, and from the ropes to Daniels, who was on the turnbuckle, and then did a move off there, all in one sequence.
Has that not been done since? I feel like
it definitely has, but I think a leap to do something is one thing. Like if you leap onto the ropes and you springboard off to do a move onto someone, that's incredible. But it's again like his sideways moonsault from before. It's the fact that he was able to leap like backwards and diagonally and then follow through with a move where his momentum and his body were moving in completely opposite directions.
You see what it is AJ Styles actually has, I don't know if you know this, one of his long lost family members is actually Mario. So he has this like triple jump ability that's just like it runs in the family.
Woohoo. Hey man, there's some stuff out there.
That's what I'm saying. Oh no, he wouldn't be able to play Mario Galaxy, would he? Because
all them orbs,
all those orbs.
No, look. Right, he has firmly said that he is not a flat earther. He is not a flat earther.
There's just some stuff out there.
All it is that there's some stuff out there. And look, I'm quoting verbatim here. I'm not trying to make fun of him here now, right? There is stuff out there from the Flat Earth Society that he thinks it's worth looking at. It's not that he thinks the Earth is flat. It's just that the society dedicated to the non-science of proving that the Earth or questioning the Earth's roundness have made some very valid points. But I'm not going to tell you what they are.
Yeah.
Much in the same way where AJ also said, you got to be careful what you say on Twitter or what you say in your promos because they'll come after you, man.
Yeah.
Like, we don't know who that they is either.
No.
You know, there's an ambiguity here with AJ, I think.
Yes, the they is doing some heavy lifting. But yeah, I would like to know what exactly it is about the flat earth stuff that he thinks is so difficult to argue against. Because, like, I feel everything I've heard about the flat earth argument theory is very easy to dispute, even with my very limited knowledge of science.
But, like, as someone who has been a science teacher, and before that was involved in research where I had to, submit papers and get feedback and notes and argue scientific points and whatnot, there is a format in which scientific discussions are meant to take place. You can view it as a Pokemon battle.
Right.
Evidence, counterpoint, newer evidence, systemic review. You argue the point. It feels like a battle, but you are on the same page ultimately because your ultimate goal is some sort of objective truth or something that's provable or something that can be shown to be proven. It's all friendly and all that. When you have then people of a scientific mindset trying to argue with someone who the fundamental nature of the mindset is rejecting the fundamentals of science, much in the same way before, like, you're making assumptions when you're trying to argue with someone about homophobia that are simply not true to that person. Yeah. You're at a losing battle. And I think the point then where you can say, well, you're just an elitist, and that seems to be a catch-all to get out of it. The reality is this: AJ Styles definitely, at least some point in his life, believed a whole bunch or was convinced by a bunch of very convincing arguments from Flat Earth. I don't blame him for doing so. Smarter people than him have fallen for it. Lots of celebrities are avid Flat Earthers.
I bet loads of wrestlers are Flat Earthers and we don't even know.
I'll tell you what, a slick video package will do all sorts, including making you excited for the main event of Backlash, right? That's just what slick video packages can do. He then goes on to Talking Smack, where Daniel Bryan very, very publicly and with the utmost glee and sincerity made him out to be the biggest fucking idiot in the world.
It is a bit like...
The Earth is a sphere.
I love it, but it reminds me so much of being in school with, like, the smart kid who obviously is going to do very well in life, who's going to go off to this fancy university, has all the privileges, being like, haha, you idiot school bully, don't know this thing that I know. And it's like, yeah, obviously you should know this because it's just fact. Like, you should have been taught this.
And
but
it's
also,
not,
is it
it's
really
not helpful,
fair to make fun of them?
It doesn't help.
But also, it's really funny.
Look, here's a teacher who had to really, when I was learning to teach, like, when I was observing lessons, I'd be like, why did you, like, engage with them about this? Like, why, like, this person was saying, like, the amount of times, because where I was teaching there was quite a religious community nearby, so there was oftentimes, Mr. Biology had to defend the works of Charles Darwin, this, that, and the other. The temptation to go, you're an idiot, you're misinformed, like, you know, it's very strong because kids aren't very good at defending themselves, and you could literally say, you're being really stupid, and that's it. But what are you doing there? You're literally, all you're going to do is make sure that person is never going to engage again.
No.
And, like, there were times where I had students where I'm like, this person is so full of problematic bullshit in their head, and I would engage with them more than anyone else, simply because I know if I didn't, that they're just lost fucking cause. And that's what's kind of sad with AJ. He's been like publicly shamed, and no more so than with the gay community. It's like he's not going to have that conversation now because he's too scared. He has said he doesn't interact with anyone on Twitter anymore or on social media because he just can't deal with it. And what he can't deal with is having to argue it because it's too hard.
And to be fair, he's not done he's obviously being a bit lazy about
There's some
this.
stuff there, but there's more stuff there which involves me doing work, which is hard, and I'm not going to do it.
I'm a bit busy. I've got lots of family members, and I'm also a professional wrestler, so I've not really got time.
Reasonably sure that vaccinations will give my child autism, but I've a good hunch.
I saw it on Facebook, so
it's got to be fine.
Probably true.
So, like, yeah, his problems with this are the same with a lot of his problems, and I'm sure all the problems that you come across when you're looking at Facebook at all the people you used to go to school with or work with or are related to who do similar stupid shit. We've not yet developed the technology to have the conversation as it needs to be.
I mean, I think there are definitely some people who need to be told, you're a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
Pull your head out of your ass. Stop being a piece of shit.
I think it's the point where the people are being aggressive about like talking about the earth being fucking
being
flat.
Very hateful and harming those around them. I think at that point you absolutely have to shut that right down.
Now, I would definitely say there's probably more hate on the side of us who believes that the earth is round than those who believe it's flat, mainly because it's such a confounding belief that we've had to reconcile our knowledge with.
It is very invalidating as someone who knows the earth is round. You know, I've seen the curvature of the earth from a plane.
I'll attempt to respect your belief if you want to call it that. Like, yeah, but it's easy to see why people like, and with AJ, I think I was mentioning to you as well, where, you know, you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, you know, and it's God first, family second, wrestling third. Once wrestling's done, I think that you won't hear from AJ again. I think once he's retired, he'll be off, he'll be family man, and that'll be it. He'll be kids, grandkids, and that's all he'll really care about, I think. I don't think he wants to, I think he thinks he can get away with never addressing this, and then 2 or 3 years he'll be done, and then I'm gone. I'm out of the public eye.
He's probably right.
You know, it'll happen with Lesnar, happen with Stone Cold.
Yeah, happen with lots of
and
people.
He's got fucking podcasts.
Yeah, you don't even need to shut up. Like, full stop. You just need to not talk about that particular issue for people to really sweep it under the rug.
And it totally works as well when there are those of us who don't even realise how eager we are to not talk about any of these things. I had to be, you know, more or less dragged kicking and screaming to realise what a piece of shit Vince and Stone Cold were. Other than, like, you know, I had my lie in my head where it's like, oh, I know they're doing the stuff and they're bad, but I didn't want to really look about it and challenge myself on it, you know?
I try not to think about those times because there were so many times when I, like, found stuff about Vince or Stone Cold. Well, not Stone Cold so much, I don't think I really looked into it.
I originally found out a lot more than we ever could have bargained for with Stone Cold, yeah.
But I think Vince was the first time where I, like, found out stuff you didn't know, and I was, like, trying to get you to see what he was like, really.
But I was like, no, he's this brand of horrible that I'm comfortable with.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to know anymore. I don't want to know about this other stuff. Yeah. But yeah, I think you got to ask yourself the question. It's like, are you happy with him being a role model when it's very obvious that he's ducking?
Yeah.
You know, he's ducking what... Is that what role models will do?
No.
The important thing is when someone challenges your beliefs is to run away, you know, and find a podcast where their beliefs are even worse than yours. So, you did say you didn't enjoy the match as much. It was a slower pace, more of the cerebral style, as we said.
Yeah.
But I thought it was important to show you a different feather to AJ's bow, seeing as you've seen lots of him being regular spectacular. How did you get on with AJ and Daniels?
It's just occurred to me, I said I had a question and a comment. I only did my comment, not my question. So quickly, question, who are the yellow men? What's with their t-shirts?
Those, Joe, are members of the Bubba the Love Sponge army. They're loyal listeners of Bubba the Love Sponge's radio show.
I'll say no more.
And as the bringing in of Hogan and Bischoff has now been made public, these gentlemen were offered free tickets, and their numbers would increase until they were asked politely to not come back again.
Okay,
so, yeah.
Cool. I gave this match 2.5 stars.
All right.
I liked it, fine, but I have no interest in watching it again.
I feel an issue with this is that you could be Hogan and Bischoff and go, "Come on, brother, look at this. We need some action, brother." You know, they can dismiss this as being like, this is just that quiet cruiserweight stuff that no one actually wants.
Because they're Philistines like me.
Yay! AJ leaves the company after a few more bumpy handovers and rough changes. He was super critical of Hogan and Bischoff. Like, as soon as he had the option, he said they killed the company. Like, he was very upfront about that. But, like, it wasn't as if Dixie Carter and a few of the other members of the Brain Trust didn't have some really shitty, terrible storylines they tried along the way. And I can't really talk about it too much because it is mainly in reference to CM Punk. But CM Punk, a character we've not done an episode on yet, he had a very kind of public leaving of a company, let's just say, that was turned into this exquisite storyline that is
this the pipe bomb?
It's the stuff of legend, Joe. And 3 years...
I don't know anything about the pipe bomb. Or I always assume that it's the moment where CM Punk did a poo in the ring.
Pipe bomb!
And they had this great story around it, and he left the company because he did a poo.
Yeah, and all the videos come up. What did CM Punk do a pipe bomb in the ring?
This is what happens.
Wait, does that mean every time you see those compilations where it's like top 5
ring,
pipe bombs,
he's doing a little poo?
Well, you see all those other, like Paul Heyman's pipe bomb or Vince McMahon's pipe bomb.
Poo.
They're all the little poos.
Yeah. This is what happens when someone who doesn't know anything about wrestling has to be in a wrestling podcast, but doesn't like do episodes on some of the main players. They have to piece together what's happened.
We'll get there. We'll get there eventually. Let's just say they made a storyline out of AJ leaving TNA, which was based on the lines of AJ's told them to go fuck themselves. He's running like eat pussy on the wall. He's getting in a souped up motor, and Dixie Carr's on her hands and knees going, "No, AJ, don't leave!" And then he literally just left.
Wow, okay.
There was a shoot interview that I watched where it was very apparent straight away that they were going to do this whole thing where AJ's like left the company and like, they're like, go off AJ, go do your thing, go do some indies, we'll bring you back with a cool new storyline, a new character, that you're the guy who told TNA to go fuck themselves. And he literally did a shoot interview. It was 2.5 hours and he's there going, yeah man, TNA, I hate them so much, and you never know, I might come back, man. I got some unfinished business there, man. Oh man, and
there's some stuff out there, man.
That was the thing, is like, he was being really legitimate about it. Like, he was talking very truthfully about a lot of things, but there was also him trying to like work the Marx brother and like, we're gonna come back and do something later. He didn't go back and do something later.
Oh dear.
In the year and change thereabouts that he was gone, he was in Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, Ring of Honor, New Japan Pro Wrestling, did a tour in England, CZW. He was the first American since Brock Lesnar to win the New Japan Pro Wrestling Heavyweight Championship. He became the leader of the Bullet Club. He went to Chikara. He formed a team with the Young Bucks. Like, he basically, remember when Cody Rhodes left WWE? He's like, I'm going to go do the wrestling bucket list. I'm going to go do all these things I wanted to do when I was in WWE. AJ like did that before that was a thing. He just went off and every cool company he went to, he did the top feud in. He did everything.
Wow.
He did everything so that when he went to WWE, people were like, yeah, alright, it's alright, I guess, because you've done pretty much everything. You've been to New Japan, you had all those great matches, you'd worked the Tokyo Dome, you worked in PWG.
What's kind of mad to me is the fact that, like, so many times when we cover wrestlers who've, like, done things like that, where they've, like, traveled the world and experienced all the different promotional companies, that they improve so significantly from just exploring different styles and like seeing different genres of wrestling. But AJ seems so consistent in his style, like even before he goes and becomes this travel journeyman. Like his style doesn't change significantly.
No, it's just gravy. That's all it is.
Yeah.
His hair looks better.
Yeah.
He gets to be in a cool, like him being leader of the Bullet Club and him being aligned with the Young Bucks. I think that was very important in kind of bridging the two generations of cool indie wrestlers that made it like kind of, he got the seal of like, yeah, no, he's cool indie wrestler. He's elite before elite was a thing. And I like that. And I think him being a heel in Japan as a white guy, there's a specific skill set that comes with that, and it has to be a lot of non-verbal heel antics and whatnot.
Perfect for AJ then.
And it is perfect for AJ, which is why we got a lot of recommendations for AJ stuff to do in New Japan. And I'm very, very happy that we finally get to see on the podcast one of my absolute current faves, a man who is as fascinating to look at as he is terrifying to witness, Minoru Suzuki taking on AJ Styles. This is from the G1 Climax 2014 from New Japan Pro Wrestling. And this show, which breaks, I think, the concept of Dave Meltzer and wrestling journalism having a one sole voice of what is objectively good or not.
Yeah.
It's that AJ Styles has only got one match of the year ever.
What?
And this is it.
Wow.
He's only won match of the year by the Wrestling Observer once in his career. And he only has, as well, one 5-star match to his name, which is that triple threat.
Very strange. Because, like, it's
Is
one
it?
thing to have a match of the year because, like, obviously there can only be one match of the year, so that's
Yeah.
very competitive. It depends
yeah.
massively on the current state of wrestling that year. But only one 5-star match? And I know it goes up to 6 stars now, but...
7, I think.
Was it really 7?
I don't know.
Bloody hell, Dave.
And I mean, you could just see, in fact, we've had the greatest wrestling match ever recently. So
How many stars did that get?
I've got at least 8, I would imagine.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's really going to make it... I just think it does... I would say as well, it's not as if I don't think Dave Meltzer's saying my opinion is the objective truth.
No,
I
but
think
some fans
Some
do.
fans would probably would take that viewpoint. But I just find it quite strange about AJ is that I think he was an internet darling before the internet realised it could have darlings.
Really? That's interesting.
Like, he was just kind of the default original, like, cool guy from another company, you know, who would never be in WWE, surely. Minoru Suzuki, though, is it a name that you've seen before? Is it a face you're
Yes.
familiar with?
I am very familiar with Minoru
Well, he's
Suzuki.
not just showing up in a Yakuza game where I'm playing Clan Wars or something.
Oh, I
is he?
wouldn't be surprised. He would fit right in. He's a very scary man who is angry and has a towel over his head. So he's like Taz, but better.
Ah, yes. When Suzuki came out here, there was a long stare from you at the towel before you were like, yeah, I think that's why I don't like Taz.
Yeah, because I think everything I was not that impressed with Taz is something I love in Minoru Suzuki. Like, Taz is just like this angry man who with a towel on his head. And okay, short, fine. That's important to some people, but
Yeah.
doesn't really make any difference to me. Whereas Minoru Suzuki, he's so much scarier. Like, I don't know, there's something about him.
His
maybe-
eyes, there's something going on in those eyes. I was
I don't think
captivated.
I don't think it's just his eyes though. Like,
Yeah.
I find his ears very scary. His nose is scary. His head is scary. He's a lumpy man who looks like a boxer.
Yeah.
Like, he's got this kind of, I don't want to say scarred face because I don't know if he is.
He looks
but
like
it's-
a warrior, Joe.
Yeah, he looks like he's legitimately been in loads of fights. And especially, like, I know what he looked like as, like, a young man,
Yeah.
and he's, like, this model. Like, he could have been, like, honestly, like, a supermodel. He's so bloody handsome.
I love the idea of, like, in this match, you've got flippy heel AJ Styles, the cocky leader of the Bullet Club, against this, like, real, like, physically... This man whose sole purpose in life seems to be to hurt others and beat the shit out of them, which makes me very excited because I think this is a period of time where AJ certainly figured out how to use his heelness and his in-ring style to kind of work together a little bit more logically, because I think in America an issue always was like, wow, fun move, wow! But in Japan, there seems to be more of a respect of, okay, that is an awesome move, but that 450 is going to if and you get an ooh instead.
I love the
you know?
ooh. The ooh is great.
The ooh is very
we
good.
need to get the ooh in Western wrestling audiences.
If we can also have ooh.
When's that appropriate?
Usually after a "You're in trouble" chant from the performance center.
Ho, ha, ho, ha, ha, ha.
Lots of empty arena wrestling to get through on our Patreon page, folks, if that's your thing. So there is a new look for AJ Styles, which is the goatee and the hair. The hair, which I have it on good authority, that it was a stylistic choice for his in-ring persona.
Okay.
That the hair flips when he does his dives, which looks
Very
really
good.
cool and photogenic.
Yeah, notice in our artwork, he's
Ah.
got very flippy, glittery hair. Thanks to Dan so much for making AJ as beautiful as he is.
And also as well, thank you for incorporating the curvature of the earth, it feels, in that picture
Yes,
as well.
it's a slight dig.
There's some stuff there in that picture, is all I'll say. Like, you know? But what I like as well about the hair is I've heard that he can use it to call spots. When he's on the ropes, his hair is over his head and he can be having a good old chat and you'll never know, like,
Yeah,
which is really interesting.
We've talked before about my love of long hair in wrestling, and it's also how it can be used as an offensive maneuver by grabbing someone with it, throwing them around. I think hair pulling is very effective. Yeah.
You were
long hair
demanding
works
a
well.
kiss at the start of this match, though. You were over and over demanding a kiss.
Well, they start off by, what's the term here? Sizing each other up?
sizing each other up, yes,
And
squaring off.
Squaring off, yeah, and they kind of both like lean at each other. But oh my god, can you imagine being that close to Minoru Suzuki? It would be so scary. Like,
His
I
breath
don't
smells like
know.
punches.
Like fists. AJ looks like he's trying really hard not to be scared. But like how, like I know it's wrestling, so it's fake.
Yeah.
But how do you look into the eyes of someone like him, like Minoru Suzuki, and not fucking shit your pants? Like, he looks so scary.
That's what I like, is that most of the match is AJ trying to convince himself that he's not scared.
Yeah.
And I like how they flipped on its head as well, that you've got, you know, compare this to your standard American story, you've got your you know, the grinding, physical, like, weathered-looking guy who, no, he's not a scary old bitter heel. He's a good guy face. And the handsome young man who's flipping around with all the flashy offense, he's the bad guy. And I love any time you've got a mix of styles. And you wouldn't think this would work at all. These two things, you'd think it would be some sort of a trade-off between one guy getting to flip and the other guy getting to slap the shit out of him. And yet they find a way. AJ being thrown into the crowd and like literally jumping over things and diving around, and the women wwho scream when they see Minoru Suzuki. Yeah. I want more high-pitched screaming in wrestling.
This is why we need like just generally more diversity in wrestling audiences, because like obviously I think it's great having the
I'm going to start screaming high-pitched, I think.
It's so good. Like that's what I always try and do at wrestling shows, is contribute my high-pitched voice to the cacophony of sounds.
Yeah.
Because I think all the different sounds, the better.
AJ's arm gets worked by Minoru Suzuki, who works a variety of horrifying arm bars, and it very much... There's joint manipulation, and then there's manipulating the fingers to a point where there's no way you can convince me it's close to falling off. There was some very, very harrowing maneuvers done in this match.
Yeah, Suzuki tries to break AJ's finger, and it's gross. There's a lot of thumb offensive maneuvers in this match. Lots of working the thumb.
Yeah, and they kind of, I think, is that because they're trying to get into it being a strike battle? Like he's trying to stop AJ being able to strike with him, so then he can just slap the shit out. There's this really great moment, and I love, it's one of AJ's most fucking fabulous moves that he does, where he does this kind of combination of different... We talked about in Tajiri when someone does like a big kind of flurry of strikes.
Yeah.
I love that AJ does it, but he does like spinning back fists and all these like, you know, cool kicks that he's obviously... AJ's obviously someone who's been influenced a lot more by wrestling video games than wrestling.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
You know, because I'm telling you, when we were playing No Mercy, we did an episode of video games way back when. I was telling you, like, I knew all these moves I would never see, like Northern Light suplexes and, you know, forearm strikes I would never see in WWE. It's because the games were developed in Japan, you'd see the moves. And there's AJ with his Yushi Jiroshi and his Air Raid Siren and Code Red. You know, he's very, very, very much showing you the moves that you were seeing in other parts of the world. Not necessarily, you know, at home in the US.
And he's a big nerd gamer boy.
Oh, Joe, I have to tell you, the most upset AJ was in the shoot interviews that I saw, at any point, he was burying Hogan, he was burying Bischoff. But let me tell you, the 2008 TNA Impact video game, that is the thing that annoys AJ Styles the most. He's like, hey man, I might go to WWE and work on one of their games because, you know, it's pretty cool stuff, man. You know, their games are great. Not like our game, which sucked. And I was there. I was a consultant. Me and Joe worked on it. We gave them notes. We fed back. The development process was stunted. It was wrong. It wasn't fun to play. It wasn't fun to watch. And he actually worked. There was some other wrestling video game that came out. He worked as an uncredited consultant on it.
Wow.
Him and Omega. Big wrestling video game nerds, for sure.
We did get a few tweets, actually, about AJ's various tantrums.
On Up, Up, Down, Down.
Down, Down. Apparently he's broken more than one controller in his time on there.
Well, like, we made a joke on a video way back that Adam did, you know, about him, like, the only reason I lost to you on Mario Kart, man, is because I was using the left Joy-Con, and that stick was too close to my thumb, man.
He's a sore loser, which is really funny.
AJ Styles, everyone's big brother, like.
But, like, I wouldn't say he's a sore loser when it comes to wrestling. Like, he's fine putting people over.
Because it's not. Because I think he realizes it's not a fucking contest.
Yeah.
He is quite, like, he's quite ego free in the sense that I don't think I've seen AJ like kind of try and sabotage anyone's career, even when he's been in positions of power.
He doesn't mind to be booked when he loses. He doesn't care who he really loses against.
As long as someone comes out looking good, that's it, yeah. He's enthusiastic about wrestling looking well.
Looking good, yeah.
And I think when he, even like in the most critical TNA, you know, the most critical he was of TNA, it wasn't like, I'm angry and I hate them, those fuckers, they fuck the company, fuck Hogan, fuck Bischoff. It's more like, I'm just sad and disappointed because these people want to make it better and they're making it worse. I want the company to do well, and it's really frustrating because I've been trying to do it for 10 years to make this company better than it is. So, yeah, I mean, I think he's got quite a mature attitude to the wrestling business, and he's no reason to be. No. In fairness, if you worked with the shit, Russo, Hogan, Bischoff, like seriously, like all right, you know, he's a fairly decent view of things. Because, in 2014, he was offered another contract by WWE.
Wow.
But it was a developmental deal to go to NXT.
Oh my God, can you imagine?
And, Finn Balor, he took that deal. And he said, I'll do NXT, fine. But AJ was like, no, I've got 5 years probably left in my career. I'm not going to waste them in NXT.
Absolutely. Both of them, I think, made the right call.
Yeah, for sure, Z. AJ Styles, another reason why the fingers might be worked on is because as leader of the Bullet Club, he's doing lots of gun gestures.
Yeah, you can't do the gun gesture.
And I like, when he points it at his head and then he breaks the gun and he's like, my gun, my precious gun. We get the phenomenal forearm caught in midair into a fucking armbar. And another reminder that AJ Styles is an absurdly strong individual. He manages to pick up Minoru Suzuki from the ground for a Styles clash. The man is made out of several deli counters of cold meat. How the fuck did he do that?
I have no idea.
With one arm as well, he does the Styles clash to sell her arm.
Amazing.
That's so fucking... And I loved the selling of the strikes. There was a pit where they were doing another strike exchange. And Minoru jabbed him. Did you see this? What AJ did?
Don't think so.
It's when he went ugh, and he kind of crumbled into a pile of potatoes and then slowly fell over. It was so funny. It was absolutely hilarious. We get another Pele kick and the Styles clash. AJ wins a match which surprisingly saw interference in it, but I guess that was point of the Bullet Club. This was a crazy clash of styles and certainly makes me want to see Suzuki on this podcast again very, very soon, and certainly very different to what you would see from your usual diet of AJ. What did you think of this one, Joe?
I really enjoyed this match. I mean, I don't know if I'd necessarily pick it as a perfect match to show someone who wants to see more AJ, because I feel this is more of a...
If you're familiar with them.
Yeah, it's more of an advanced match. So I gave it 3 stars out of 5. I don't know if I'd necessarily watch it again, at least not until I'm more familiar with AJ Styles' moveset.
Yeah.
Because he does, kind of, as you said, he does a couple of variations on his classic moves, which kind of went over my head.
Yeah.
I didn't really understand why they're impressive. So, yeah, I mean, it was good. I love Minoru Suzuki. Definitely want to see more of him.
You don't have to say you don't understand why something's impressive. If it's not impressive to you, it's not impressive
but
to you.
I don't want to say that means it's not impressive. I always want to be clear that, this is just my opinion.
I'm not a baby, if I don't think it's
No, I know you're not, but some listeners are. And, sometimes if I say, this thing isn't impressive, they'll go, well, it is to me. And it's like, well, obviously it is to you. I'm not saying it's not impressive to you. Yeah. I'm saying it's not impressive to me. But I can't speak on behalf of everyone.
Well, I'm glad that you took the time to explain that and all that. I think this was an interesting one, seeing that AJ was again doing something a little bit different. And of course, if you want to see what you're seeing in wrestling now, go back a few years and see it at New Japan Pro Wrestling instead, because joint manipulation, which was certainly a novel thing in 2014, I'm sure it feels like, is by no means the same thing these days. When AJ signed with WWE, I'm trying to cast my mind back, because I remember early on the podcast, a great difficulty I had was trying to reconcile WWE's half-hearted, here's someone new, or here's someone from the past. I remember Sting coming in, I remember the NWO coming in, I remember a lot of big people coming back in, and it was meant to be a big deal, and it was huh? So when AJ came out as a big surprise in the Rumble in 2016, was that something that you were anticipating, or was there much buzz, if you recall, at the time?
If I remember correctly, there was a bit of buzz. It wasn't like when we had Shane or Daniel Bryan back and it was a big surprise. I'm pretty sure I remember you telling me, there's this guy AJ Styles. You might remember watching a match of his.
Yeah.
He might be coming back.
There was rumors that I think WWE actually said we have signed a number of people from New Japan. Because that's when Nakamura came in.
Yeah, it was around this big surge of veteran talent from other companies.
Some of whom had been in the company before.
Yeah.
Interestingly, the big turning point in the contract negotiations for them at the time, because he was still negotiating with TNA to go back with them, as they were really hoping he would, and that they brought in Gallows and Anderson. That was part of the negotiation. He's I will sign if you sign these two as well.
Wow.
And that is quite interesting, because obviously there's camaraderie in wrestling. I'm not sure if we talked about it a lot, but AJ, there's a few people in his life, in his kind of inner circle, Gallows and Anderson are part of them, where that was a deal breaker for him, getting in back to the company.
Yeah.
And he had an emotional moment on his live stream recently where he blamed himself for them being fired, thinking that it was a failing on him, that he hadn't shown the company the value that he could so easily see in them.
That's sweet.
It is sweet. And I kind of sticking with your friends is not the easiest thing to do in WWE.
No, they really make it hard.
How has AJ gotten on in WWE compared to like what you've seen from him in these other companies and knowing a bit more about like the majority of his career being in other places?
I think he's done exceptionally well, but I think he's really had a lot of help from WWE. I think they've done a really bad job of understanding and educating fans on why certain wrestlers are perceived as good as they are. Like Shinsuke, for example, like I feel once he was signed to, like, obviously signed to NXT, he had some fantastic matches, but on the main show, it kind of petered out a little bit.
The mystique went a little bit,
It just didn't really do anything, and I think he was uninspired, and I don't blame him.
So you think the presentation of AJ is like showing you why he's special as opposed to... Because, I mean, you mentioned earlier a match we watched this morning and we reviewed it, and it's one that you said to me was your fave ever.
It is, yeah.
Where he beat John Cena clean at SummerSlam.
Yeah.
And I think that's a case of showing and not telling that someone is special.
Exactly. They've put him in a lot of matches with a lot of people who I really enjoy the matches of. Like, he's fought Kevin Owens before, and Roman Reigns, and Brock Lesnar, and all sorts of people.
Interestingly, though, I think AJ... as great as he's gone on in WWE, and I think you could look at the list of like the essential, like I had a bit of a difficult time in some respects compiling a match list for this because I didn't want to do stuff that we'd already covered for the pay-per-view reviews, and I feel like we've spoken ad nauseum about a lot of his run in WWE on the different brands and whatnot. And I think it was hard because obviously a lot of those matches were kind of something that we'd covered and all that. But I think as good as they were with the presentation of AJ, they've almost gotten a little bit too lax with the presentation of AJ, where it's like, it's AJ Styles, man. It's going to be... And like Heyman, who was running Raw for a year or so, he was quite guilty of that, where it's like, it's AJ Styles versus Ricochet. I mean, come on, it's obviously going to be great. I was like, but it's not. It's not great. Or remember AJ and Nakamura?
Yeah, that was like
the dream match, man.
That was like... And again, I don't blame AJ for that. I blame the WWE. And I don't blame Shinsuke either. I blame the WWE.
I don't think WWE realised he has some shortcomings. He's not like fucking... He's not the second coming of God that he can make a great match happen with anyone, like, you know.
But, like, I think... under different circumstances, him and Nakamura would have had, like, a fantastic match.
Yeah.
I think just WWE on... I can't remember what show... Was it Raw?
WrestleMania.
It was WrestleMania.
It was WrestleMania. It was for the title. Nak won the Rumble, if I recall, as well. And they were like, dream match, dream match, dream match. It's going to be a dream match. And the best thing about it was him giving him a big willy shot at the end. And then him doing it over and over and over for the next few months.
I don't remember there being much, like... impressive maneuvers in that.
It's because I don't think Shinsuke could do what he could once. Like, AJ has managed in a way that some of his contemporaries haven't to still wrestle exactly the same as before. Like, if you look at Christopher Daniels in AEW, I love him to bits, but the man is essentially bow-legged. He is very much feeling the effects of the career. You know, there's a lot of wrestlers who you can see have had to change. Nakamura, you can definitely say, is feeling the effects of strong style.
But I don't blame Nakamura. I don't think it's his fault that the match wasn't good. I don't think it's him not being good enough.
I think it was a case of hype, though. I think AJ's an easy target for hype because AJ has such great matches. You can go AJ Styles versus... Because you mentioned Kevin Owens, and they have had some good matches. But I remember they had one or two clunkers as well.
They did, yeah. But this is, again, I blame the WWE.
Yeah.
And I'm just quite confident that there'll be someone backstage who I'm probably not aware of, Bruce Pritchard or someone, whose job it is to go, make that less good, please.
Yeah, because I think...
there's Randy Orton on the main event, and they have to have a really amazing match.
If we were going to see AJ Styles versus Ricochet literally anywhere in the world... I would have been guaranteed it would have been not just a great match, but something special to remember forever. And I'm fighting very hard for my memory to even cash it in the short-term memory column from last year. It's like, no, you will not remember that match because it sucked and it was bad and disappointing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's not been all hits necessarily.
Yeah, I think maybe what it is, and again, I don't know what I'm talking about here, so maybe I'm totally wrong, but I feel like WWE as a company is not prepared to book the really, really technically skilled flip-de-doo matches that companies like TNA or Ring of Honor or New Japan have, like... AEW have, like, more confidence booking. Like, as we were saying, WWE is sports entertainment style. That's not flip-de-doo, necessarily.
That's why Backlash we didn't get AJ Styles, but on SmackDown we got AJ Styles versus Daniel Bryan. Yeah. For some reason.
They don't really understand the value in these different styles.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. I mean... If you look as well, like at some of the matches that he had, even in 2016 alone, him and Jericho, that was amazing. Him and Sami Zayn, where they had an incredible match. He had those matches with John Cena, multiple matches with Roman Reigns. He had the feud with Dean Ambrose as well. He was champion for thereabouts a year on SmackDown. He had fucking fabulous matches. So, like, What surprised me most about AJ is I remember the first month or two, they were like, he's the rookie redneck, or he's the pit bull terrier. I'm like, oh, Jesus, they won't get him. But it felt very quickly thereafter that they got him. I think Chris Jericho was probably quite instrumental in helping them because he was the first feud actually understand. But, like, he's someone as well now where AJ is being viewed by many people as, like, he's the guy you want to have your match with now.
Yeah.
He's like Undertaker, for instance, the most recent WrestleMania. The Boneyard match with AJ Styles, even though AJ did fuck all in terms of like what you know AJ Styles for, there weren't very many flips for all that. There were lots of punches and sound effects. Yeah. But like you have people now like saying, I've heard like Ric Flair the other day was like Undertaker has to have another match with AJ because it was so good. He's the only person he can have a match with. Like, and there's all these like people thinking like if Legends are gonna have one more match, like Edge has to have his match with AJ because he's the guy. Is AJ in your minds as someone who's watching TV the wrestler, like the top wrestler in the world? Because many people will say that AJ Styles is bar none the best wrestler in the world in 2020.
I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah.
I think there's an awful lot of pressure to put someone as like, oh, everyone has to have their last match with AJ. Because like I would have said that, but then he had those terrible matches with Shinsuke and Ricochet.
Yeah.
And like I don't think that was anyone's fault other than like the booking of the match. Like I feel they were told probably not to do certain things.
And maybe the Boneyard match was just all very good. Maybe. Or it's brilliant, it's the best thing ever. Whatever you want to think, you know, it's all right. All opinions are valid.
I mean, yeah, I thought the Boneyard match was fun. And I think the reason people liked it so much is because it didn't have much wrestling.
Yeah, and it was quite silly.
Yeah, The Undertaker can't really wrestle and he's very silly. So it worked well for his particular character.
Do you think that, like, AJ should finish up in WWE, or do you think he should, like, head out to the wild blue yonder? There was a few mentions of what it would be like to see him in like other wrestling companies and whatnot, let's just say.
I think he should do whatever he feels would be most fulfilling to him. I can't say whether or not I think he should stay in WWE or go elsewhere because like his family is so important to him. So it's going to be whatever helps them feel most settled, I guess. Like I don't see him moving to Japan.
I think the gist I've gotten from it is that he signed another contract with WWE quite recently. There's like I think 4 years or so thereabouts to go, and I would imagine he'll wind down and either be the showcase attraction where you'll see him once or twice a year. Although I mean that's the thing with I always like the idea of like, the showcase attraction. You're like Triple H or Goldberg or whoever. But the thing is, have we ever had a showcase attraction person who only comes out once or twice a year and their style is flip-de-doo, crazy, phenomenal? It's not. It's always some old slugger or some old ham who has to be sprayed with Febreze and brought out and smashed into a locker a few times for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I don't know. I'm not sure if AJ will be the once or twice a year guy. He'll either be doing it full time or he won't be doing it all. I think he will be like, and that's me, folks, and you'll never hear from him again.
I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's at this point too much of a wrestling fan. I think he will because he wants to, as you were saying earlier in this episode, he likes having his fingers in all the pies.
Yeah, he likes to teach, obviously.
He loves to teach, he loves to train, he loves to be involved in storylines, he has opinions on things, and okay, he may not be like a lifelong wrestling fan, but maybe that's in a way to work to his advantage because he can have a bit of a refreshing attitude to some of the angles.
Sure, there's no way he can't teach like at an incredibly high level because he's someone who naturally was able to do so many things that I think he can teach, but also even with like I'd have AJ Styles in promo class being like, what do you think it was like being the TNA World Champion, not be able to cut a fucking promo? It sucked, like, and I had to get good at it. Here's how. But here's the question then. I was going to ask you, like, can you, like, good conscience foresee a future where you have AJ Styles, being the cuddly performance center coach?
No.
Knowing that he's got some issues.
They're not cuddly, though, are they? Performance center coaches, are they?
I don't know. It feels like everyone's leaving the fucking AJ Styles in the dust. I hear that fucking Shawn Michaels is calling out people for not understanding embedded institutional racism and stuff like that. It's just, like, I don't know if I see AJ Styles fitting into the corporate structure is probably a better way of saying it. Maybe calling them cuddly isn't well, but at least WWE, you have to say, are at least aware at the corporate level that their employees can't be seen to be saying certain things or should be seen to be saying other things.
And yet they get away with saying an awful lot.
Yeah, they do.
So I feel like as long as he's AJ Styles, he'll probably get away with it. And I just hope that like Shawn Michaels and like Randy Orton, he is surrounded by so many people who want to help him improve, and the fact that, like, obviously on some level he wants to improve, like his attitude to wrestling, if he could just apply that to other areas of his life.
I can see your frustration with him is
Yeah,
palpable.
I really want him to be a nice, good person.
I want to have a holistic whole AJ Styles fandom. I've got 20 asterisks.
Yeah, I have to distance myself from him, and
I've never described myself as being like, oh, he's one of my faves or one of my fans. Yet going through that Samoa Joe AJ Styles match was like, wow, this guy is so important. He's one of the reasons I got into so much of the other wrestling. No AJ Styles matches those years, no podcasts.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. Like, you know, and you can blame him if you want. That's another asterisk some of you at home can have for your AJ Styles fandom. I just
think if there's hope for Randy Orton, there's hope for anyone. I know it took him 15 years of fucking being educated, but just...
My worry, though, is that my main issue with AJ, a lot of the stuff is kind of, the main thing is the homophobia. And I think there's definitely issues of race as well. He's been caught saying the N-word on tape.
Has he?
Oh, yeah. Earlier when I was talking about him being on Talking Shop, he didn't say the N-word. It was forcibly turned into that, if you know what I'm saying. AJ Styles, he obviously has issues with race. I think that, I don't think you can be wondering if Obama is American or not. Like, some of those old Spin Cycle episodes of TNA, folks, they haven't aged particularly well, and they're all still up there. And I think that as a result of that, you look at Randy Orton and you think he's been surrounded by intelligent, thoughtful, and well-meaning black men and women for probably a dozen years at least. And people who've experienced it from every level, like people like Booker T, who've been in the company longer than he has, people like Xavier and Big E, who've been, younger than him. Like, he multi-generational help is on offer there, and these people understand, and your colleagues would be more than happy to help you out there. And he has attributed that, Randy Orton. Yeah. He said, it's the last 10 years I've slowly learned, and it must have been very difficult for them to teach me, but I've learned from my black brothers and sisters. I think WWE for AJ, though, is a bit of a different situation. Maybe us hoping that he will learn in the same way by attrition almost. Like, I don't know how many out people there are in WWE. I'm aware, obviously, of Sonya Deville, and Darren Young is WWE affiliated. But, like, it's a company that has historically very struggled with inclusion.
Yes.
And I don't know if there's that similar environment where AJ could as easily learn, let's just say. It might be a bit more on AJ. I'm not sure how many of his colleagues are there to help him in that respect. It's a very straight company.
Maybe I'm very naive. Yes, I would say the company does seem very straight, but we don't know how many closeted queer people there are in the company who just don't feel safe at the moment to come out. But I don't think it's necessarily on gay people to educate
it's not
him.
Black people's job.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's actually probably too harmful for them to lay it upon themselves to do that job. But I think, like, generally, I think the culture is a lot more educational, a lot more positive, and helpful.
Finding out that Braun Strowman, when he said all that shitty stuff about, like, Player Uno, where he's like, if you're asking for a handout, you should get these hands. He was a total fucking dumbass about it, and he was apparently taken aside by, like, Sami Zayn, like, hi, I understand, like, fucking society. Do you want to have a chat? Like,
I think historically, wrestling has been a lot more stubborn about its issues and been like, what? No, fuck off. Whereas now, if you're getting people like Randy Orton and Shawn Michaels, who are the most stubborn people in the industry, who are the most embedded. Like, Randy Orton, literally, his father was like one of the fucking right-wing wrestling guys, right?
Well, all I'll say is the history of the Orton family is, wrestling in Missouri, which, I don't need to tell you that there's probably some checkered history there, at the very least, to say with regards to race relations.
If that can happen, then surely there is hope, because even if there's not that many gay people or LGBT people to help educate AJ Styles, I just think the culture these days is not as accepting of homophobia. Like, I think I don't know this to be true. I hope it's true. But, like, when Rhea Ripley used the F slur in that live stream, she was called out and she apologized. And I think there is more of a culture now of people calling people out and going, look, that's not okay. It really hurts people, like, on
and
a
I
deep
find
level.
myself much more fine with Rhea Ripley now than I was, 6 months ago when I first heard about it,
And it may be that AJ
it's
Styles...
It's a process,
Maybe he's teaching himself now. I don't know. Maybe he's currently educating himself and that's why he's shut the fuck up, because he actually needs to spend some time learning for himself what is going on. Or maybe he's trying to hide his personal hateful views. We don't know because he's not talking about it.
You got to start somewhere, though. And the question as to whether or not you started, I mean, you know, he was someone who's been called out by CM Punk for his silence during Black Lives Matter protests. You know, everyone had something to say, but AJ Styles, you know, you can drop a thought or two on it, AJ, at least, you know. So will we be waiting naively for years to come?
Probably.
Can you reconcile I mean, as someone who routinely reviews wrestling involving someone who murdered his family, I think it'd be hypocritical to say I can't watch AJ Styles, but there is something that's always held me back from my adulation of AJ, and I think we may have circled the wagons around it a little bit here today. Let's get into your tweets and your Facebook posts. And we're back. So, a little peek behind the curtains here. We sometimes take a little break between the first bit and the second bit, and the little break this time ended up having the speaking out movement, huge allegations coming out into the world of wrestling, some long due changes that seem like they may be underway, and a lot of victims coming forward and thankfully being listened to. And, you know, usually we don't, it's been like a week and a half since we've recorded this. Usually it's kind of a day or later on that afternoon. And in the time that's come since, Joe, you've been editing the episode. I've been listening to some of the parts you've been editing. It kind of feels like that ended that first bit on I was so hopeful. It is patently naive, it feels like.
Yeah, it's funny that, like, it feels so dated now, what we were saying.
Yeah.
Like, I feel...
Remember the fact that I mentioned that AJ streams on Mixer, which literally as well is out by the wayside. So, but whatever, you know, this is trying times that we're in and all.
Yeah, it's just, we recorded that bit, you know, as we said before all this speaking out movement has happened. Also before it was revealed that, like, there's like maybe 25 cases of COVID potentially in the WWE.
And we had just seen the wrestling community react to the civil unrest, the protests that was sparked by the George Floyd murder and Breonna Taylor and what's happened since. And we think we were, not to say like blown away, but just a little bit happy to see some of the wrestlers speaking out who we thought previously wouldn't have spoken out. And I think we used that point to dwell on, like, well, AJ didn't speak out then, so kind of, well, is he ever going to? And we were kind of hopeful that maybe if Randy Orton could do it or Shawn Michaels could do it, then AJ could as well.
But yeah, when I was editing this then, especially that last bit, I feel so weird even, like, we've never done this before.
No.
But, like, I was editing, I was like, oh, I don't know if I agree with myself anymore. And I don't know if it's responsible for me to just keep that in, but I also don't know if it's responsible for me to just edit it out, because that's not truthful as to what my opinion was and how it's changed. So I thought, best thing we could do is actually just show you folks at home that we've listened to our own opinions in the week since we recorded it, and we have changed our opinions. We've looked at what's happening, and we just thought we couldn't end where we did. Like, I felt so naive and also partially responsible, because I know historically in this podcast, I have been a huge celebrator of the fact that, these days wrestling is so much more wholesome and pure, and like wrestlers are so much more nice.
A lot of comparison of this generation to that generation.
And now it comes out that actually we have the same problems, maybe worse. We don't know. The point is that we have the same problems that we had, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago.
Yeah, and I think we like to maybe convince ourselves that we see wrestlers, and the WWE is the prime example, and we see wrestlers when I've read stories and I've read books. We talked about Brett, we talked about Foley, all these people who were in this company when the lifestyle was different and it was more drinking and partying, but mostly it's that kind of the loathing crushingness of being on the road, and that being the kind of the cycle to numb it almost that so many top stars went through. And I think we kind of see things like, hey, they're playing video games, and like, hey, they're kind of, there's some people who don't drink, and there's some people who just kind of aren't into that lifestyle.
They've got friends who are women or black.
But like, all the while we're kind of looking at a glossy thing you're seeing in WWE, and like literally on our doorstep here in the UK, there was stuff happening that would make you look at the lifestyle of the late 90s in the WWF and go, well, at least they're fucking on the road on their own, traveling around, and it's not a big fucking den of predators colluding with each other. And I will say less so than a lot of podcasts, mainly because solely from the focus of this show and where we've decided to look into and whatnot, we've not spent a long time dwelling on Brit Res or the British wrestling scene. I think we have certainly had to think of some of the episodes we've done in the past and a lot of the episodes that are coming up in the future. And I think that it just, you're right to say, I don't think the wrestling industry had maybe gotten to a place where we really hoped it was.
I just felt like it was not cool. That's a very tame way of saying it. Not ethical for us to release this episode finishing on the point. It's like, well, AJ Styles may be a good guy. We just don't know. Because, like, actually, it's not enough to not know. You have to prove it. You have to take action. You have to show everyone every single day.
I think it's very worth bearing in mind here. We're not accusing AJ Styles of like assault or anything like that.
No.
And there's a whole swath of things that come out at the moment, and it ranges from serialized assaults to casual climate where things like rape jokes and slurs and things like that are accepted. And I think it's just wrong for us to assume that silence on the matter and an assumption that it's all okay and someone's changed their mind and all that. I just don't think that's not going to cut it in this climate anymore.
Yeah, and just hearing myself back talking about how, like, oh, but, you know, things have changed now and everyone's so much better and more educational and the environment's just more wholesome. It's like, actually, I don't know that. And I know I said that at the time that I didn't know that, but I really don't know that, and that's never been more evident than this week.
There are cases now in British wrestling, and this is just to kind of, and I think AJ is just, unfortunately, he's the topic of the episode.
Yeah.
And I think when you're looking at the moment in 2020 with where this is happening, you know, Sammy Guevara making his casual kind of rape joke, you know, which some people have just labelled as being like, well, that's just kind of immaturity and whatnot. But like, I think it speaks to this kind of culture of this crass culture, this boys club that's kind of developed. And I think AJ is just, as he's the topic, it just kind of, we couldn't help but see this through the lens of how we were analysing some of the supposed issues that AJ had.
Yeah,
you know?
Because even if they're not necessarily equivalent, it's all related. It's all part of a larger toxic issue of not just the industry, but our society.
Yeah. I was expecting with AJ a lot more, like, that I would see people who are kind of like, look, here's why I can't watch him, or here's why I have difficulty, or anything like that.
It's interesting you say that, because I think there's probably a very careful reason for that, and I think that is, I don't know if it's WWE or AJ Styles or both, but he doesn't, as we were saying, he doesn't talk about this stuff anymore, and it's very easy to forget people have said things, or brush it under the rug, or just kind of ignore it if, you know, it's not talked about often. And the fact that he is, like, deliberately keeping quiet, I know I said earlier in this episode that could mean he's learning. It actually could mean something much more deceitful, which is that he's being very careful to deliberately not talk about his hateful views because he knows he would be cancelled, and rightfully so.
It's almost, he feels like we were trying to put him into a separate category from Lesnar earlier, and it kind of feels like, well, it feels like they're just two high-profile, well-protected guys who have kind of pretty much all the power in terms of how much of themselves they want the world to see, and they can kind of step away from that. And don't ask, don't tell. Is that really what we want it to be in 2020 with wrestling?
Yeah, is that really good enough?
Is it good enough? And it's not. It's not.
We need to hold each other and ourselves to a higher standard than that.
It really does. And I kind of feel like it goes beyond just wanting to put a good foot forward and wanting to present wrestling in a positive light, because I don't want it to be the case where this can go on anymore, where it can be this unchallenged for this long. Because I look at the lists that are coming out, and I look at all of the accusers and the accused, and it skews so young. It skews so young to the extent that, like, the majority of people where the accusations are coming forward are in their mid-20s to their mid-30s. And like, I look at the list and I see nothing from the 80s or the 90s or the 70s when we knew it was bad. And we just convinced ourselves that it was better now, and it's not. It's worse. You know, it actually seems in many ways that it's worse.
Yeah, because
there's a whole generation of people who've probably been abused, and high-profile abusers. And Lord knows I've probably said all sorts of fucking great things about them on podcasts.
Yeah.
But I kind of feel like, look, if we can go back in time and dredge up, like, we don't have to go through every fucking person who survived a trauma and dredge everything up.
Yeah.
But we have to say now we're drawing a line and we're not going to let it happen anymore.
But how?
But how? I don't know. I just feel like I'm upset and I'm wound up about it and I feel like powerless, but like I have to try and do something.
I do think it is worse now because there is something that's extra sickening about people using safety and safe spaces and protecting vulnerable people as a brand and not actually giving a shit about what that means.
Well, like, fuck it. Absolutely fuck it, because I keep thinking, like, hey, you all know this thing about AJ. You know this thing about Austin. You know this about Vince McMahon. But, like, why would you? You've not been watching wrestling for fucking 25 years or whatever it is like I have.
And even people who have, we forget, don't we? Because we don't talk about it enough.
We convince ourselves.
We go, oh, they had a good match, or oh, they were funny that one time.
Or they're important.
Yeah.
You know? And I just think, yeah, we need to hold ourselves to a higher standard, you know? And I think safe spaces can't be fucking just something to sell out a ballroom.
No, that's
you know?
really, really gross.
Buzzwords. Fuck your supposedly safe space.
It's such a corporate branding thing as well, and it makes me really sick.
Yeah. And it's up to the wrestling industry now to listen and to find out how it is that we can make something that can aspire to be a fucking safe space. Because right now it's not that. And I find myself here nearly 15 minutes into talking about this, and we thought we'd just talk about it first. It feels like I'm very emotional, and this keeps coming out because, like, the last week, I've just kind of I don't want to say I'm numb to it, but I'm certainly shell shocked, and I feel helpless and I feel overwhelmed, and it doesn't even affect me directly.
No,
I'm fucking nothing in this. I'm not a victim at all. You know, I hope for better days, I guess.
Me too, but I don't think hoping is enough.
No, there's gotta be action.
I am definitely hopeful, and I think I've said this in other places, like our Backlash review, and I'll be talking about it a little bit in this month's Q&A. But I think it's a good thing now that this is coming out. This is absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
But I don't think we should get, laissez-faire about this and relaxed and think, we've come out the other side now.
Step
this is all
one.
over. This is
Barely
going to keep happening over and over again. As long as people in positions of power are allowed to abuse those positions of power, that's what we've got to change. We can't let them get away with it. And it's not just a matter of these individuals have done bad things, so we're going to stop them. No, it's the infrastructure. It's the whole issue. It's society. We have to go back to step nothing, start over from scratch. And I don't really know how to do that. But
well, thank God this is happening in the midst of a pandemic.
I know, seriously. I'm so happy that it's happening now.
It's necessary, and I think it's no coincidence that we're seeing it in so many places, so many different industries. And I know if you're probably listening to this right now, your heart's probably breaking for 20 different things right now, you know? And if it is the things that are breaking your heart, it's just that your favorite industries and your pastimes, the things that bring you joy, are going through these horrible times. And I'm sure there's people who their hearts are breaking for much bigger, much more important reasons than that. And I want to say, don't feel guilty for still loving wrestling, you know? Because there are still people within that. The only people I feel who can actually bring change are within that business right now. And there's some incredibly brave and strong people now, victims and survivors of abuse, who are working together and they're trying to make something better out of it. So don't feel like, I don't feel that the window is closed on wrestling. I think I see work being done now in lockdown. It's the hardest time to coordinate things, and people are working together and trying to get things done. But we can't let it slip. We can't let the standards slip. We need to establish what the new normal is going to be, because there's going to be a new normal with everything in the world. There certainly needs to be a new normal in wrestling as pertains to wrestling shows as well. I mean, I by no means don't think this is or definitive. This is everything we have to say on the matter. I don't know where it stands.
And it's a bit random to be talking about it in an AJ Styles episode, but it just happens to be, this is the episode that's coming out around the time when this is all happening, and we wanted to make sure that we at least talked about it on some platform which is available to everyone. More
people than normal will listen to an episode about AJ Styles, and I think more people than normal need to hear this. That's all.
And as you were saying about don't feel ashamed about being a wrestling fan, I think that's very important, because we need to come out the other side of this, and the only way we will make this industry a better place is by us trying to be the best fans we can be and trying to impact the industry the best way that we can. Like,
I
if
think,
we
yeah.
all just leave and go, well, fuck it, like, that doesn't achieve anything.
Yeah.
These problems will still continue. I mean, and they're going to continue regardless, but, like, we just have to accept that we have to keep fighting this battle.
Exactly. If you've got a voice of any size, if you've got a podcast with 12 listeners, it doesn't matter. Use your voice. If you have a community that are doing the right things right now, or you see the victims or the people who are trying to make positive change, support them. Do whatever you can. If you want to help, if you want to stick it out and make it a better place, don't just sit and hope it'll happen. Because I think the fans have the ultimate power here. You vote with your feet, you vote with your dollar, you vote with whatever it is. Don't support the companies that aren't making an effort right now. And you're going to have to constantly listen, because it's a lot to keep up with at the moment.
Yeah.
It's tough right now if you're on Twitter or whatever it is, or you're on Facebook. There's a lot of very toxic groups, a lot of toxic discourse. All I'll ever say, just from my experience, Team Friendship, where we post on Facebook, they're very much handling this, I think, admirably, and I think it's a place where you can have a safe discussion about this.
Yeah, and I want to point out as well just why it's a safe space, because I genuinely, Team Friendship, it's not just about branding or anything. We don't even have a brand, but the way we actively try and make Team Friendship a safe space, and I say we, I mean, I helped set up the group years and years ago, but I'm not actually involved because I don't use Facebook anymore, but I very much trust the mods.
Team of fantastic mods there.
They are absolutely incredible, and we have structure and rules and guidelines in place. Content warnings, there are certain issues that are not discussed.
So, do you want to get into some tweets then, or?
Yeah, let's do it. Okay.
I mean, oh god, this feels really weird. I think we will point out, folks, that the curation of the tweets has been rather difficult at this point, because I don't think a lot of people wanted to have tweets read out that were making reference to companies and people that have now since, had allegations come out against them or have shut down or whatever. So, yeah.
First up from FT Yankee. Like Hogan and Warrior, I can't separate the opinions from the person. Except this time, it's even harder, because he's the best wrestler in the world, and not a lumbering meat sack. Well put. The gay community thing, and using the homophobic F word in promos, really sours me on his matches.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like it became a punchline in the early days of kind of, wrestling humor online and whatnot. I certainly played my role in that. And I think, yeah, it's for some that's like a warning signal, and if you know what I mean, like as in like I know some people who know that much about AJ, and that's like, okay, that's enough of a giant red flag for me. That's all. But I think, yeah, there's a lot of people who kind of think, oh, he just said something stupid and whatever. I think there probably is more to it.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and I think it's also important to differentiate between like making fun of him for saying something kind of dumb and making fun of him for saying something outright homophobic.
Yeah, it's kind of like, are we making fun of the fact that AJ said is kind of dumb, or that AJ's got some hate in his heart?
Yeah.
I don't think that it was really calibrated the way that it was intended to come off.
Next up from Get Kraken. I tried to write out my thoughts about AJ Styles. I'm now 1,000 words, and it's no use to anybody. The short version is that he's one of my top 5 favourite wrestlers in ring, and a simple, problematic man. But far from the most problematic, because it is wrestling, after all.
Yeah, and I certainly don't know where I could stand on a leg kind of saying, you shouldn't support AJ Styles, or, your fandom is tainted, or like, how dare you support AJ Styles. If we were to have a word cloud for the tweets of the Facebook posts, favourite and great, or greatest, will probably be the 3 top that we've gotten.
Yeah.
And, as someone who's one of his favourite wrestlers growing up was Stone Cold Steve Austin, and certainly the kind of learning as I grew up more about him certainly tapered my out-and-out hero worship and led me to view him as a deeply flawed individual, with you saying to me on this podcast many times before in the past, in various ways. I think the most succinctly you put it was, hero worship is for fucking babies. And I think that is advice that could certainly help. And I don't think I'm going to begrudge anyone from enjoying AJ Styles' match or saying he's the greatest in-ring performer of all time.
And I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy them. I do. I really like him as a professional wrestler. Like, athletically, I think he's very talented.
I am struggling again to find, like, tweets that maybe I'm just, at this exact moment in time, comfortable with reading out, let's just say.
It feels weird. Like, normally this is the part of the episode where we like talk about how great people are and how much we love them as fans. Yeah, it just feels weird with everything that's happened this week to just move on to tweets that are all about how great AJ Styles is, given that, you know, the tweets were sent in a month ago, potentially.
It's not fair
to the fans. It's not fair to this podcast. It just seems weird to be like, and now let's talk about how great a wrestler AJ Styles is. We know he's a great wrestler, obviously, and we know he's a
We spent 2.5 hours talking
homophobic.
about how he was a great wrestler, and we've certainly talked about his issues and stuff as well. On my end anyway, on Facebook messages, I don't think I've got anything I'm comfortable, chatting about right now, I guess.
Well, I've got one final tweet that's really good.
Okay.
So, this is from Diving Meteora. In about 2015, my now husband and I saw AJ Styles at a show in a middle school gym in Marietta, Ohio. He main evented with Facade, and at the end, they had a bunch of can surge and were spraying them all over the place. We were very close to the ring and heard AJ quietly say, "Looks like I peed myself." This was during his IWGP heavyweight title reign.
Amazing. Fantastic. Well, a lasting image to replace the one of AJ Styles wrestling in Backlash with a hole in his tights, making it look like you could see his butt.
Is it too late to change the artwork to make it look like he's peed himself?
I don't know. Maybe for the Revisited, we could do a little patchwork around there. If you are disappointed with how this episode has ended, I'm sorry. If it was not what you're expecting, I can only say it wasn't what we were expecting as well. I think we've got a duty to try and get a podcast out, but I also feel like just from you made the right call, Joe. I think when you were editing the episode, it just felt like we couldn't pretend that nothing had happened. And I'm sure we will revisit AJ. It's an almost definite fact that we will have to revisit AJ, because if you are the biggest AJ Styles fans in the world and you wanted your tweet to be read, or you wanted to have a proper discussion and a wrap-up on him here, I'm sorry that we have not been able to give that to you. It just doesn't feel right in the circumstances. We talked about it. We decided we'd do a version of it. We tried to. It felt very weird. Here we are. I'm kind of excited to announce the next episode, though, because I feel like it is going back far into the past, that we can look at someone completely different and someone who I know very little about, and I'm going to be doing some reading on, and will need a lot of help from those of you who are listening to try and point me in the right direction. Our next episode, Joe, is about the legendary woman, the only woman I know who's wrestled for nearly every single decade for which she was alive.
Whoa.
Up until the point that she was in her 80s. We're going to learn all about Mae Young.
Wow. Mae
Young, who was a mainstay in the Attitude Era and the old lady I probably saw on television the most growing up. But what we don't know about Mae Young, most of us who grew up in the Attitude Era, is that she has a career dating back to the 1930s.
Whoa.
And is a pioneer of every sort. And I can't even begin to tell you how unknown the world of wrestling for her is back then, because this is like going back to USO shows and stuff like that. Wow. This is going to be a history lesson and a travel through time. I don't know what we're going to find out. I'm certainly really excited, and you've been working with Dan on the artwork, and holy fuck.
It's very good.
Are you excited to learn about Mae? Do you know much about her already?
I only know a few bits about Mae Young. I know she gave birth to a hand.
Oh, well, there you go. That's the episode done and dusted.
I know in the Eric Bischoff episode, she put some sardines down her pants and jumped on his face.
Yes, I remember that.
I have heard that she may have been involved somehow with the fabulous Moolah.
She is linked to Moolah in her later career for definite, yeah.
Which was like really sad, because I just knew all this cool stuff about Mae Young. I was like, yeah, she seems really great. And then I was like, oh no, she might actually have been like best friends with the fabulous Moolah, which means you almost definitely knew some of what was going on. And yeah, so I hope we're going to learn a bit more about that. And I think it's very interesting that we're learning about Mae Young now, after this has happened.
I kind of feel like it could, in some respects, provide an insight into maybe how this is a larger issue in the mostly male world of wrestling. And if it feels like it's mostly male in 2015 and 16, I can't even fucking imagine what it was like in the 30s and the 40s. So it's going to be a learning experience for sure. I'm really excited to find out more. If there are any articles or books or pieces of history, interviews that you'd like to share with me and, you know, help me explain the story a little bit more. In terms of matches, I mean, I'm sure we'll watch some of the segments and whatnot from the Attitude Era. I can't see us watching scores and scores of matches and reviewing them in a typical manner, but I am very excited to see some, like, if there's early footage from way back. I mean, May wrestles before television was a thing. That's a kind of a thing to bear in mind.
That's so mad, yeah.
So, yeah, very excited to learn about who I understand to be legitimately one of the toughest people who ever existed in the world of wrestling. It's going to be How to Mae Young. Don't forget your tweets with all the recommendations, bits of history, stories, memories, and matches using the hashtag How to Mae Young. I hope when we reach you with our next episode that I am in a little bit more on stable footing. I can only apologize for you who've had to edit this and for you who've had to listen to me be all over the place here. I'm going to do some thinking. We're going to come back. We're going to, you know, I'd not to use the corny expression like put some smiles on people's faces, but I know that the podcast is a moment of respite for people, and if it hasn't been that today, I'm sorry, but I hope we'll be able to provide you a little bit of solace in the weeks and the months to come. Well, until next time, stay safe. Lots of love from me and Joe. We love you. We hope that you're doing well through all of this, and it's going to be a goodbye from me, Kevin,
and a goodbye from me, Joe.
And we'll see you next time on How to Wrestling.
See ya.